Welcome to the show, ladies and gents. Welcome to a very different and unique live stream for a change. We have a special guest. I'd like to welcome Cam from Craft and Tailored, who is joining us for the first time, the first guest we've ever had. So Cam, welcome to the show. Great to have you, brother.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited about this.
Oh man, it's a pleasure. Such a pleasure. I need to get into the chat and just address everyone and say hi. And this first comment, I want to hear everyone's comments about the Craft and Tailored logo that reminds us all of Barnes and Noble. This was something that I threw together 5 minutes before the show began, so it should be pretty funny to hear the commentary there. Okay, and one very important thing, everyone in the chat, please tell me if you can hear me. Comment one. I think Cam can hear me, right?
Yep.
That's important. Okay, that's good. Let me know if you can hear me. Comment one in the chat, which is our usual call sign. Using a new microphone setup. Okay, WC is commenting one. That's great. Let me say hi to everyone, and let's get this going. MRG 1911, Ben, Chung, Carl, Matt Marks, Giza, Dan, Megan Arthur, I saw you a second ago, Junior Johnson, Zane, all of you who are joining, thank you so much for being a part of the show this weekend. It's a Saturday. It's what we do. And yeah, as it is. How are you doing, Cam? How's your Saturday?
It's going great, man. I've been so excited about this. I'm really looking forward to this. And as you know, we were kind of talking in the I guess the lobby. You and I have these chats kind of frequently. And so I'm kind of excited to, just put this out there and kind of, share the topics that you and I are talking about and just see where this goes. So.
I did something so stupid. I was waiting for the warm-up and I'd forgot to open these properly. Hold on a second. We have a pretty cool show lined up, ladies and gents. But before we go anywhere, I first want to just, the first 15 or 20 minutes or so, no, probably not that long. I want to introduce who Cam is, his background, get him into the show a bit more. This is the first live stream he's ever done. So we're going to have a good time.
You're making me blush.
Yeah, man. Want to get you just, saying hi to everyone and chat about Craft and Tailored as it is in the background. And then we can chat about how we met and how we've connected. Like Cam said, the bonus is that we've met face to face, we've hung out, we speak on the phone, we WhatsApp and all the rest. So this is not like an advert. We're not pretending to be friendly here like in most YouTube circles. This is very genuine and we enjoy each other's company. So should be a great debate and chat about Grail Watches. What do they mean? And yeah, we'll get into that as the show goes. So Cam, take it away. If you want to get the ball rolling with who you are, Craft and Tailored, the background, how it all began, go for it, sir.
Yeah, sure. I always find it kind of weird to talk about myself, but I'll give you the kind of the background and talk about my passions and really more specifically my obsessions with this stuff. So I had a normal job. I was an executive within the technology sector, and found myself wanting to be different in a sea of what I kind of considered the same. And so I really started to look for things that had details to them and I guess kind of an energy and vibe that really wasn't for anybody else but for me. For example, if I was looking at a suit or something like that, I wanted the buttonholes to be functioning and the fabrics to be of a certain quality or a certain make or from a certain era, even though the people around me wouldn't really understand that. It was really for me. So that led me into watches, and I would travel a lot, and I still pre-pandemic would travel quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I would find myself in these areas all over the country and the world, and I would have free time on my hands. The funny thing about quote unquote the executive life is it typically revolves around a lunch or a dinner or a breakfast meeting or some variant thereof. So in between, I would kind of go to these different pawn shops and antique stores and little arcades and things like that and look for these vintage watches. And my first watch that I ever received was a vintage 1967 Rolex Submariner reference 5513, and
Nice.
the watch was kind of in a bit of disarray and it needed work, and so I had to research the parts and find the resources and all those kinds of things to put that watch back together. And that just literally blossomed into this full-blown obsession. And I think like most guys, or at least for me, my progression was I kind of just burnt out within the tech world and woke up one day and was like, I'm really good at this, but I'm really unhappy here. What is it that I'm going to do? And I kind of just, I guess, had what I call my mic drop moment, where I just said, screw it, I'm leaving this. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I had a good friend at the time that said, you're really into vintage watches. You're helping people, with the knowledge that you've gained throughout your years of collecting. Why don't you get into vintage watches? And I was like, you think that's, I guess, maybe I'll try that out. And so, 4 years later, my obsessions and passions, which are vast and broad, but also very specific, has led me to, have Craft and Tailored. And, we're in our 4th year of operation, and we're growing at a quick clip. And yeah, it's been great. So that's kind of in the nutshell story of Craft and Tailored.
Yeah, for sure. It really is. And I mean, just hearing that whole process of you deciding to pick up a vintage piece and through that process learn about them, and it really is a landslide, as we will see going through the pieces at a later stage. What I wanted to say, which I find is interesting, is that your, should we say, eclectic taste is very, I don't know, moody, atmospheric in a way. You look at the couches and everything's distressed. Everything has some age to it. That seems to translate through everything that you do. And I find it fascinating when we compare our separate tastes. As I was putting these together today, I thought to myself, what's so funny is like this 911 of yours. If you'd like to shed some light on it, please, because I think it's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. This is a 1975 911. It's an S, and yeah, I love the analog feel of these cars. And my obsession, and we were kind of talking about patina. I love patina. That's something that is like kind of funny in the vintage watch world, because patina can, by some people's standards, is damage, and to me it's a beautiful element of art that is only achieved through time and love and wear and adventure. And I think every scratch and every ding and dent kind of tells a story. And so this is a 1975 911S. It's just completely analog. I wrote an article on our blog about it because I'm just so enamored with these machines. But kind of similar to vintage watches, you get in this car and it invokes and creates an experience for me. Turning the key over, letting the motor warm up and kind of come up to RPM and temperature, smelling a little bit of burnt oil and not having air conditioning, and, pushing that car around a turn just is an amazing experience for me. So same thing kind of with vintage watches and, my travels and adventures, and some of these things that like I really obsess over and get into is I love the feel, and I like the tangible experiences. And that's really something that I love, and I guess in a weird way kind of curate within my life. Like you can see it, I guess, within the office and within the advertisements and the things that I'm very much passionate about. I think that for me, it's very real. And I think it's kind of funny for some people because they're like, well, do you really drive, a vintage 911 every day? And the answer to that is, yeah, I actually do.
That's what I wanted to know. I didn't think it was a daily driver. That's amazing.
Yeah, I love, do you really do that? Do you really wear a Paul Newman, or do you? And the answer to all that is yeah. For me, it's the real deal. And I think we live in this time and age where, there's a lot of, it's funny, kind of like the Instagram stuff where, we'll post a picture or we'll tell a story, or, I'll have an interview or something like that. And people are very surprised to learn that like, this is my real life. And like, this is the real deal for me. It's not just like something that I've set up on like a Tuesday and hired a photo crew or like whatever, like I'm actually doing whatever it is. And so that's kind of, I think, one of the elements of our brand, and one of the elements of what it is that we do is like, we live it, we breathe it, we eat it, we sleep it, it's like, it's the real deal. So.
And one thing I wanted to know was the car itself. It's virtually stock, right? The only thing you've changed is you've had the engine rebuilt, but other than that, I mean, the brakes are virtually the same. probably
Hmm.
new old stock parts. I find that very fascinating. We're going to be going to watches in a second, but looking at how we approach cars, it's pretty funny. I threw my Beetle into the mix here. This is a nice blend of both worlds, where you're someone who clearly loves to curate the old stuff and find it as in great condition as possible. I mean, this was a find out in the desert in South Africa, basically
That's amazing.
Nevada desert of South Africa, you could say.
Yeah, I
And
love the red steel wheels on that car. You see that
yeah,
in like the early 911s, and the funny thing is like VW and Porsche are very closely related, obviously.
mm.
And I actually I love VWs and
so
bugs and
what I think was interesting is you're very interested in the idea of having an old style car inspired by those old elements that remains to that past. I, on the other hand, will pay double the price of the car just to modify the suspension setup of it. I would keep it, as old school looking as possible, but if I can
Mhm.
modernize it, it's something that I would do. And similar to watches, as we get to it just now, we will see that in a similar way. You enjoy the older eclectic patina and everything else. I love the inspirations and the aesthetics of watches, but if I can find one that has all the modern components attached to it as well, that just makes it sing even more to me. So I think we'll have a good chat around that as well. There's going to be
Oh,
so
for
much to
sure.
the show. I haven't been looking at the chat at all. I don't know how responsive I'm going to be in the chat this evening or this morning, wherever you are in the world. But what I want to do now is, as we chat about Grail watches and that whole theme, Cam has sent me a huge selection of pieces to look at. We'd like to know in the chat
Uh,
if,
if
yeah,
there's one thing, so Zane made a funny comment.
yeah,
He said, "I don't get this. Just sell high-end watches. No need to live in the fucking 50s to try to make yourself more authentic or credible."
mm.
Let me address that really quick,
Yeah, man,
Zane,
go for it, go for it.
because I came from the world of technology. I love technology. I leverage technology. For me, it has. I don't. I'm not. I, these things aren't like something that I'm trying to chase or whatever to make myself feel more authentic or whatever. These things invoke experiences for me that you don't get in the digital world.
Mm.
If you let's talk maybe just a little bit about cars and maybe some watches and stuff like that for a second and kind of talk
Yeah,
about the parallel. But I think
yeah,
this is
sure.
an interesting kind of phenomenon, because people are like, well, what drives you? Why does this stuff inspire you or motivate you? And the thing is that if, for example, if you get into a brand new 2020 Porsche 911 991 era car, there's so many things happening in that car that are digitally assisting you,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
You have traction control, you have launch control, you have all those things. And don't get me wrong, I love those cars. I geek out over that technology. I come from tech. Like
Mm.
I love solid state amplification and all that stuff. But the difference is that the experience and the vibe and all of that stuff that comes from driving a vintage air cooled 911 or wearing let's say an old school sub or something like that, or even a piece of clothing, for me,
Yeah,
it changes the experience. So it changes the way that I feel about myself within the modern world. And
yeah,
so don't get me wrong, like I love modern watches. I love what Rolex is doing with ceramic bezels and parachrome hairsprings and all that kind of stuff. But the difference is that the experience and the energy within those things is 110% different. And I found myself consuming the world around myself and consuming these things differently because of that kind of more monochromatic type of experience that these things facilitated. It wasn't
mm.
as rich, it wasn't as meaningful to me. I'm also a big music lover. Like I
Yeah,
love listening
vinyl.
to records and playing music and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
Mm.
there's no doubt, if you are into guitars, you cannot recreate the tone of a tube amp without
Yeah,
having actual vacuum tubes, right? And that's a technology that is dating back to like the 1920s and the 1930s, right? Which was popular all throughout the 60s and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
for
So,
sure.
I think, again, to maybe kind of address that comment, I'm not trying to make myself feel more authentic. I'm not trying it's not a facade for me. The reason why I love these things is because of the experience and because of the feeling that they create for me personally. And that's not to say that that's the right way or the only way, not at all. I mean, I have a lot of friends and a lot of, colleagues that have really pushed my taste and experience in these things as a result of, them appreciating and understanding things, kind of in the more tech, more like forward assisted way. And I think for me, it's about finding that balance. And that's what also makes this so much fun is like, you can like the brand new, Audemars Piguet, Royal Oak, and I could really like the original version, but there's so much commonality and so much, iconic elements to some of these things that,
can't be beaten. Definitely, there's
sure.
some questions I'm going to ask you a bit later about this, especially, and talking about why vintage over everything else, different time periods that you're interested in, and that's the development. But I think we need to. I mean, we've been chatting for like 15 minutes already. Can you believe? And let's chat about. Start by talking about Grail watches and what it means. And in this space, everyone has a different thought and opinion around Grail watches, and that'll make such a nice segue into this topic. But what makes it so great is that we have these amazing pieces on show. Some great, I mean, everything is 5K in quality, so we can appreciate all the little details, all the macro, the nuances and everything. So the thinking is, I can actually address this with a question. I wanted to ask about why do you reckon people jump into vintage watches as their next step in the collecting space? You get lots of high-end collectors who pick up all the best modern stuff, but then vintage is a different genre completely. It's a different category, and it's almost like they feel it to be the next step forward. Is it because of there being a greater depth to the pieces? We're talking about the warmness and the age of watches themselves as they've aged over time. Is it because they're virtually piece uniques at that point when you're looking at, the watches that have aged a certain way, as we will see with various pieces? So do you think people gravitate towards vintage for an added level to their collecting, or just because it's generally more expensive than the modern stuff? I think that's the main question I'd like to ask.
Yeah, I think, based on my experience in working, also understand that I'm also a collector myself. So
yeah, for sure. Gonna get that just now as well. We will get to that.
Yeah. So we'll dive into that in a minute. But I think, generally speaking, when you are, I think, getting into this, and this is just based on my experience, and this is just one reporter's opinion. There are many.
Yeah.
So this is just one. But I think what's interesting is that, when you look at vintage watches holistically, there really aren't two that are the same. If we're looking at, let's say, like a red Submariner or a Hoyer or anything like that, just removing the Grail element for a quick second, the stereotypical term for Grail, each watch has kind of lived its own life and is different, and it's one unto itself. So I like that element too. It's like if you could have 3 red subs in front of you or 4 Paul Newmans or whatever it is, and each one is going to be different. Each one, I think, is going to speak to you differently. And I think that, at least for me too, as a collector, that to me is unique and unto itself. Whereas I think within the modern world, if you look at, a ceramic Pepsi GMT on Jubilee, a lot of them, they're kind of all the same, and they're meant to be that way. And they're not meant to really age, because we're using space age materials that yield a higher element of durability and yield a much more durable element of horology altogether. So I think the thing that I really like about these pieces is that each one is different, and I'm constantly blown away by seeing things that are different within the same. So for example, like looking at like an interesting Tudor or a tropical Submariner or something like that.
We'll be seeing those later on. Don't worry.
Yeah,
everyone
for sure.
What I wanted to also address, if we tackle it from the design, quote unquote, sector, which I find quite fascinating, is that when you're talking about engineering and manufacturing, there's always the improved component is always going to be favored over the inferior, and all this old technology, aluminium bezels, tritium, the works. People love the idea that might be coming back one day, that many brands are going to leverage that in their manufacturing. It's a nice idea. It's a nice idea. Lots of companies still do with tritium and Tudor with aluminium bezels, say, for example.
Yeah.
But there's this divide where dealing with modern components and something like ceramic that will never age as well as something like aluminium would, and so on as it goes. It's pretty funny seeing that clash between the two elements.
Yeah, and what's cool is the funny thing is the watch that I've actually been wearing the most, and again, I think there's like this maybe understanding that Cam is only a vintage guy and he's a vintage purist.
Yeah,
I am, I guess what you could say is an expert in the field. And the other thing too is we've been in business for 4 years, but I've been collecting vintage and collecting watches for 14. So before I actually got into this from a business perspective, I had 10 years of watch collecting under my belt. And that was both within modern and in vintage, timepieces. I just liked the vintage stuff, I think, more for me because aesthetically and from kind of a perspective of collecting and having things that are truly unique unto themselves, that's something that I liked. But the watch that I've been wearing a lot recently is a Tudor Black Bay 58.
I was going to guess that sounded just like the example, and it's because it has those vintage elements, but also the modern components that makes it more wearable, usable on a daily basis. So you get the best of both worlds in a sense for someone who enjoys the vintage inspired pieces and all the rest.
Yeah, somebody said in the chat, please define what constitutes vintage.
Good. Go for it.
I think that's a great question. By the stereotypical definition, vintage would be something that has like 30 years of age on it. So obviously there's watches now that are from the 1980s, and even some of the watches that are from the 1990s that are quote unquote considered vintage.
Yeah, neo vintage we say, hey.
Yeah, exactly. So one segment that we've seen a lot of growth and kind of activity in is the neo vintage line of watches, which I would say is, anything that is kind of in the, 1990s era, but, still kind of possesses that modern element. So if we're looking at vintage Rolex, there's modern watchmaking elements that are in that watch from a technical perspective, but also you still kind of have one foot in more of like the vintage, more traditional technical element, like tritium on the dial, but maybe the dial's glossy with a white gold surround. Yeah. Maybe we see the introduction of, a sapphire crystal or quick set date complication or something like that. But, from an aesthetic and, maybe from a physical perspective, there are some vintage elements that are still there. So that would kind of be, neo vintage. But I think
it's such an interesting market because you're dealing with, the way the industry is working now, it seems like it's banking on the idea that these vintage watches are hot, that people want them. So I find it how creatively they're addressing these new pieces, looking back into their archives and discussing that. It's pretty hilarious how they're almost backtracking. I find we could definitely talk about that because I want to look into like your favorite inspirations. First, I want to ask the chat a second. Does this look okay? Is the split screen okay? Or should I make it full screen so we see the images better? Let me know in the chat. Maybe comment yes for big screen or no for leave the screen the way it is. I'd be interested. Again, I'm sorry that I'm not referring to you guys in the chat. This is a very different format to how we usually run the shows. And that's just great. I love the fact that I can sit and listen for a change instead of constantly reading. No, you guys prefer this. Oh, I see 2. Yes, full screen. Yes. Okay, this is the thing. When the polls we get lots of no's, more no's. Split screen and show SpaceX. The SpaceX launching. I didn't know that, Neo. Screen is cool. Okay, thanks everyone.
Zane is making me smile, and this is exactly why I love vintage and why I love vintage watches, and also just the watch community as a whole is because everybody has a different opinion, and that's what I love about this is Zane's taste is clearly on modern watches. Like Zane likes modern stuff.
Zane loves modern Pateks, and I mean it's just great.
Which is amazing because like I like modern Patek. Like I have a couple of customers that we've chased down some really interesting and complicated Patek, and you loop a modern Patek dial, and there is an art form in the way that text is laid onto the dial, the way that the finishing is done, the way that a marker is set. Like
5370, that's one of my favorites. Split chronograph.
To die for. The thing that's awesome too about some of the modern watchmaking and some of the other houses like even Patek, for example, is that there's like finishing on the underside of a bridge that you would never see, until like a watchmaker takes it off and you like look at the underside of the bridge. And, I think that that's also another interesting thing too, that you know, maybe you don't see in the vintage side, right? Like, you know,
Exactly.
so yeah, so Zane is the epitome of why I love the watch community and why I love this so much, because you know, this is what ultimately makes this cool. You know, it's just a difference in opinion.
Always. And I mean, geez, the way I approach watches, on the other hand, it's completely different to, if I try to be different at least, talking
Zane,
about
oh, I
design.
can't stop. It's so good.
Yeah, man, just whatever. I mean, the chat as it is. Guys, please be nice. If you can, please be nice. I'm trying to run a good chat going on here, and whatever's
That's
happening
awesome.
in the background.
This makes me laugh. That's so good.
Um,
All right,
but
so let's get,
otherwise, what else was I was gonna ask you some more questions. The comments are great, by the way. We generally do have a really good laugh with the comments. What's a good? So we kind of, I don't know how we can best discuss it, but how would you describe? How would you define a Grail watch? That was the first question that we set ourselves in the beginning.
you know, I think that there are stereotypical Grail watches
Yeah.
where, you know, it's like, you know, we could go over some of them, right? It's like, you
Oh,
know,
do we have to?
3700 Patek, right? A Paul Newman, a
Yeah.
big crown sub. Like, you know, I think that some of those watches are kind of those stereotypical Grail watches. But I think, you know, for me personally, a Grail watch is the watch that, you know, is important and meaningful to you. I mean, I have some Grail watches in my collection that are seemingly simple, and I also have Grail watches that are like very complicated, very rare. You know, by you know, maybe most people's standards, like expensive. You know,
Yeah.
but like I actually just got a Grail watch for myself. It's a Seiko 6309 8000.
Ooh,
So it's
I
basically
know
the
that reference.
precursor to the Captain Willard.
Okay.
So
6105. Yeah.
yeah, so it's basically a different style case. It's a little bit thinner, not as chunky. The
Hmm.
crown is located at, you know, kind of like the 4 o'clock position on the case. And it kind of looks like more of like a Doxa, but it still has that like very interesting dial that you would see in like a, you know, like the Willard, like the more traditional 6309 8110. So that's a watch that I had been kind of like hunting for a little while, and I got for myself. So I think, again, to answer that question, you know, based on my experience, I think Grail watches, you know, differ from people to people. But I think
Yeah.
that there are those iconic designs out there, you know, like maybe a Big Crown or a Paul Newman or like a
Yeah.
JPS or something like that, that would be a little bit more like, I guess that stereotypical Grail, right?
Yeah,
And I think that those,
there's this. What I love. I mean, the cover photo for the show was a Zenith, a good solid yellow gold Zenith, and I wanted it to be that stigma watch, the one that, I mean, in the beginning it was a day date, a solid gold day date. All of these pieces are the ones that we all claim to be. I mean, they're as well founded, I guess. They're very valuable, and they offer an immense amount of quality for what you're getting. But at the same time, I definitely, this page, what I try to do at least on this page is not address the monetary value of things as much as what speaks to you the most, and using design as the hook to get you into these pieces. What about it speaks to you? My philosophy, actually, that I'd like to cover, I think I've done this a couple of times when chatting about pieces. Love this. Is this a B01? Is that what they call this reference? Or was it a 50, what is it? Breitling
are
56?
you,
This
you're
Navitimer.
talking about the Navitimer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually early. So so one thing that is interesting, that's an 806. So the
806,
reference is
that's the one.
Breitling
That's the one.
806.
Thanks.
But what's cool about the 806 references is, you know, and then again, this kind of is more about, it kind of dips into the vintage side. But you know, there's a lot of different, you know, there's a lot of different variants of the 806, right?
Yeah.
You have like the AOPA 806s, you have the twin jet 806s, you have, you know, the later like 70s 806. Matter of fact, Breitling just re-released the 806.
They did, yeah. I remember
Yeah,
that was big news. And all these brands are doing the same thing. I love that, how these brands, like we talked about Tudor a second ago, all of these brands are starting to jump onto this wagon of bringing out these pieces that, you know, replicate the past. I mean, I'm wearing one at the moment. I'm wearing a 57 Seamaster.
I love that watch.
What I wanted to say, it slipped my mind for a sec. Talking about Grail watches and just picking up pieces in general. Let's just look at something else. I don't know what's coming up next. Let's have a look at this. I mean, this looks like a 6B variant.
Yep.
Just post, I'd say just post Second World War, like 1948-ish, transitioning over to 50 around about that time.
Yeah, and what's cool about the Omega, service watches in general, along with like a lot of like the Dirty Dozen type of watches.
Yeah.
These watches have a lot of history to them. So, I think that also can make a Grail watch for some people. It has for me, definitely, because if a watch possesses a certain element of history or a story, I don't know, I kind of like feeling that in the watch, and it kind of carries with it a different weight. But going back to, this specific Omega, what's cool about it is that a lot of these watches were used as tools in the truest sense. And I think that kind of tying that back into the Grail thing is like, we think about these watches, and I like, the idea of like buying a watch, and I'm kind of having that romance with my my Tudor Black Bay 58.
Yeah.
But I was looking at it the other day, and the bracelet is starting to show a little bit of wear, and the sides of the case are kind of getting a little bit more matted down, which is like fun. And I bought that watch, brand new. So I think with some of the military watches and also with some of the Grail watches, you can kind of look at it, and I think there's that saying like every scratch kind of tells a story.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, we're talking about military watches in general. I don't think there's a greater bond between the owner and the user when it comes to military watches. There's an X factor of them being being made for purpose. I love it. I mean, we talk about mil spec all the time on this channel generally. And there's just so much depth to it. I love the inspirations, and we could talk about this for hours, I'm pretty sure, just one watch. But there's like,
for sure,
ladies and gents, there's over 200 photos in this lineup. So pretty sure we're going to be going through many. And I think I saw a comment from Demetrius earlier saying that you're missing the commentary over the watches themselves. We'll definitely stop on a few as it is, but this is a tight ship. We're already half an hour in, and the show's going to be like 2 hours long maybe, so I definitely don't want to stretch it way too far. But getting back on track, this is an example. And there was also a great question a second ago about the 5711 Nautilus and it being overhyped, or considered a Grail, or is it just hype? There was a brilliant question left for me a couple of days back, and I want to ask this question of Cam later, and we can discuss this later on in the show about stylism versus intrinsic legitimacy and merit to watches design.
Sure.
It's very deep.
Yeah.
It's very like the context is something. But talking about this, for example, solid gold, Submariner, blue on blue. Yep. This is a good example of a piece that we generally see spoken about as the quote unquote Grail piece. And I'm being asked what my Grail might be. Geez, like, I don't know. We can talk about that in a sec. I most definitely, at this point, I just want to get myself into the seat of a Rolex. That's how far I am at the moment. I'm so new to this hobby, ladies and gents. I've been, running this channel for about a year at this point. I just got my first watch, 57 Seamaster. It's nothing special, but I'm learning. The whole process of this is to learn. So as it is.
Totally.
And I definitely want to ask that question of Cam, since you have, gotten so many pieces in the past. You've purveyed all of these pieces. What speaks to you the most? But we can do that later. This is going to be a long talk in any case.
So did you want to talk a little bit about like the gold subs and that kind of stuff, or
I think,
or gold watches as Grail pieces?
Maybe that's a good idea, actually. Gold watches as Grails in general. What do you think that is? Is that a stigma? Is there validity to that? Should watches be something more discreet, like platinum or white gold in this area? What do you think? Why do you think yellow gold has gotten this kind of acclaim nowadays?
What's funny about gold watches, and I'll say that gold has been used within watches since the beginning of making, things that tell time, right? I mean, if you go back to like looking at pocket watches and stuff like that, telling the time was not only something that was, a requirement, but also something that was, in some cases, a luxury. Obviously, we're here, we're talking about watches. There's some expensive.
These aren't cheap things. We have to clarify that. I mean, again, I'm just a regular guy. I most definitely can't afford these things without a huge loan. So you're preaching to the congregation. Carry on.
But the thing that was interesting, especially with gold watches, and gold sport watches and more specific, is
Yeah, yeah,
sport watches were watches that were intended to be tools, right? So like
yeah.
a yellow gold Submariner like this, this is
It's
a
an oxymoron.
16808.
If, yeah,
So this is what what we consider more of a neo vintage. So you have an increased depth rating. So instead of like a 200-meter depth rating, you've got 300-meter depth rating, or 1,000 feet.
mm,
And that's due to technical advancements within the case design and the crown and the sapphire
mm.
crystal and things like that. But what's interesting is if you think about this as a watch for an intended purpose,
It can do it.
who's
It can most
yeah,
definitely do it. And I just find it kind of. Would you say it's an oxymoron? You're dealing with something that's yellow
yeah,
gold. That's supposed to be a heavy duty dive watch. I mean, this was brought out in the 80s. At the time when everyone was experiencing that Wall Street level of the world. And I find it
totally.
funny. And even to this day, people still love this as part of their childhood almost. Many who buy these watches now saw these pieces in their childhood, and it's something that they aspire to own. Anyway, I'm dragging on this too long. We have so many pieces to look at. I definitely don't want to
Totally.
hang us up on the subject, but I mean,
But to touch a little bit on, I think, on what you're saying as being an
yeah,
oxymoron, like I think that for me, it's funny because you have a yellow gold dive watch, and are you really going to be leveraging this to time bottom time and decompression? Like
yeah,
maybe, right? Like and I think that's kind of funny, like to think about. You're like this guy who's like on his yacht, maybe he's in like you know, you know, Italy or something, and he's going to do a dive and,
yeah,
and something like that. And he wants
yeah,
that kind of executive from the, boardwalk to the boardroom kind of piece. I think that
yeah.
that's kind of the idea a little bit. But also it's a bit ridiculous too, when you
Yeah.
think about
Ed,
this
Ed
thing
has a great
being,
Ed has a great comment. Says it's pure statement of wealth, in my opinion. That's quite a good point about the subject. And I mean, yeah,
yeah,
man, there's so much we can. I definitely want to talk about designs of the time, and
yeah,
there's so many little comments. Like I've put uh, a few quotations on questions I'd like to ask you later, but we're going to be dragging on for so long as it is.
hmm
What other questions could I ask? Let's think. What else do we have that might be interesting? The characteristics of a Grail. I think that might be good. And again, I'm getting comments in the chat. I'm sorry if I don't address them. Most of them are like essays. And as it is, I don't know how tight the ship is at the moment. What's the time? 37. We're running for about 37 minutes. We're doing pretty well. Just keep
yeah,
bantering away, and that's just how we roll. I think Megan put a point saying gold and two-tone sports watches are definitely making a comeback right now. And very good point. And it's probably because steel is so sought after. And you can find two-tone for cheaper than steel nowadays, right? That's a consensus.
yeah. Which is kind of funny to me because, like for example, like a gold 1675 is going to be like
Mm,
in, let's say, for one that, I mean, obviously, price on vintage watches and price on Grail watches in particular, is vast and varied because
mm,
we're looking at things like condition. You're looking at things in some cases like provenance, completeness.
mm.
There's all those little elements that kind of determine the value of a watch. And then also at the end of the day, what's a watch worth? Well, a watch is worth what the market will consume the watch at, right? And
Yeah,
that's
that's
kind of the funny
definitely
thing
that's definitely the
about some
point.
of, yeah, like for example, a 5711, like what is the right price point for a watch like that, or a ceramic Daytona? Those are
Mm,
things that I've, really racked my brain around. Like, what is the actual price of this? Because the market will, the supply is quote unquote not meeting that demand. The market is consuming these watches above what the MSRP is, right? And that's kind of funny. So
yeah.
I think, going back kind of into the vintage side, it's like you look at a gold 1675, let's say the average price for a yellow gold 1675 in, normal condition is in the, mid to high $20,000 range, maybe even dipping into the 30s, depending on condition. But then you look at a two-tone 1675 and that watch is like $9,000.
Mm,
And then furthermore, just to dice that onion another way, you look at, let's say, like a steel 1675 of the same exact area. And sometimes that steel, and in many cases, the steel 1675 can be more expensive than the two-tone. So I think, the market is kind of
the
coming
dictator.
back around to going, wait a minute, like these two-tone pieces, like why wouldn't I pay, 8 or 9,000 for a two-tone 1675 versus, a steel one? So, and I think that, the big thing about two-tone watches is they are, gold is gold, steel is steel, but two-tone is kind of its own in-between thing, right? It
Its own
either
world.
works, you either dig it or you don't.
Yeah.
I did like, Rolex re-releasing, their two-tone GMT with rose gold, because I thought that that was just really interesting to see a two-tone, rose gold sports watch. I thought that that was kind of something that was unique versus just going with a yellow gold
That's
or
pretty
something
cool.
like
Yeah, yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
I think you just mentioned the GMT. The whole, I love it. That whole effect of the brown working against the rose is a nice touch. There was something else I wanted to say. What I find hilarious is that when you look at the figures of manufacture out of a brand like Rolex, it costs about £500 to make a Rolex watch, all things considered. What is that in dollars? That's like what, 750 maybe. I don't know. I'm terrible at conversions, but it's hilarious to think that that markup on top of that, plus then we look at gray market prices going double of the standard. I just find it, the industry as it is, I think it's a minefield personally. That's why I generally never talk about dealing and prices, because it's not something that really interests me. I don't treat this as it's not my business end, should I say, like it is for you. But yeah, it's fascinating hearing your take on figures just in general.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's fun to see all this and kind of track it and uh, look at this from a historical perspective.
Sorry, I just got a super chat in from Thomas. Oops. Do you have any watch hang-ups, things that put you off a watch? Oh, it's a great question, Thomas. And that's a good way to start. What should we say? Yeah, Cam, you want to go first? Watch hang-up, as in your pet peeves behind a watch. What is something that ties you down? And thanks for that super chat, Thomas. Thank you. And everyone who's joining. Again, there's like over 200 of you who are a part of the show.
This is
I
amazing.
really do appreciate everyone who's been a part. It's a different, as we can tell, it's a different format to usual, but that's the fun. We get to banter and debate different subjects, and so it is. So again, watch hang-ups. What is one detractor for a watch for you?
I'll say this. I like symmetry and design. In some cases, one thing that I can't really get around is like the new modern maxi style case. But also, for me, the watch doesn't work with my wrist, and it just doesn't work with kind of me from more of a what would you call it? I guess kind of like an ergonomic perspective.
Yeah.
So. From a design perspective, some things that hang me up are the physical execution of the watch. Sometimes watches won't work for me, meaning that they from a size or dimension perspective, they don't jam. They don't work. I like things that remain original. I like things that possess kind of a vibe to them. I don't like watch hangups.
It's a difficult
I don't know.
question.
It's kind of
It's difficult.
it
You
is.
put on the
It's a
spot.
really good question.
Yeah.
I really like the question.
Yeah. Again, the thing is, when you're not doing this live, normally you can sit down and have a think about it, but then on the fly, you have to think a little bit more with the subject itself. So in my case, my biggest hang up, I would say, is proportion. I talk about it all the time. Aesthetics is one thing for sure, but balance on the dial relative to plots, to numerals, line weights, everything in between there. That is the one thing that really bugs me. Size and presence and proportion, most of all, I think is the one key aspect.
Yeah, and I think size too. I generally, a watch hang up for me is just size. Like I've never been into size larger watches. I'm not a big guy, so I can't wear those watches, and so that's a trend that I didn't get into. And also, as of right now, like I think we're seeing companies, even on the modern side, go into smaller form factors. Like even look at Patek. Patek is releasing watches that are 36. Rolex with their day date, they went all the way up to 41, and then they discontinued that, and are kind of just hanging at 40 and in the 36. So I think size would be kind of a deal breaker for me. And there's also some vintage watches that again, they're just too big, and I'm finding myself coming down in size and being more comfortable wearing something that would be by maybe more stereotypical standards, a little bit, on the smaller side.
For sure.
But
And
again, that kind of works for me. So
it's also that relationship between case and bracelet and how it fits the wrist. There's all sorts of little bits and pieces. What's Les? Again, guys, I'm so sorry that I'm not getting to the chats. I'm really struggling. I want to let Cam talk for once. It's nice that I can actually listen to someone talk for a change. But I see a question from Les saying, just stainless steel is now invisible. Discuss. What do we mean about that? Again, there's another question from Dear Artifact. The comments are coming in fast and thin. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Again, this is all unscripted, unplanned. Miles, thank you for the super chat. I think I saw another one, but it's disappeared on. I don't know where it's disappeared to.
There was Rich who just bought a beautiful 1016 from us. So congratulations on that, Rich. He asked why I didn't meet him in person on Friday. Okay. We were meeting in person. It was a little bit upsetting. I apologize for that. One of the things that's kind of been interesting for us, and I don't know, I must have ruffled Zane's feathers or something.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I definitely didn't want this to be a business. I mean, it's
no, and that's cool. I'm a very open and just kind of out there guy. I don't hide from anything, and I think that's one of the reasons why we are growing and moving in the way that we do. We're also still a small company. I mean, the funny thing about what it is that we're doing on social media and with like all these interviews and this stuff is like, this was a passion that literally turned into a business, and it's hard to be in 6 different places at once. Like this past, the very interesting thing is people will call and say, "Hey Cam, how's the watch market?" And it's like, I am slammed. I work 24 hours a day. I mean, as you know, you and I will sometimes message and it's like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, LA, and you're like just waking up.
I get not even one line. I get a word as a response because you're on the go. I mean, we've also, I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, but Cam and I have met up. We've hung out together before in the past, and he is nonstop. Like he's on the phone 24/7 virtually, whether it's making appointments, whether it's asking how a deal's going somewhere else, and it's. I don't know how you do it. I would have.
I
migraines.
I can't, and maybe that's where I ruffled Zane's feathers. And Rich, I'm sorry. Please come back. Would love to, have an espresso and a coffee. And in some cases too, I've dedicated really my life to understanding the details of these things. And there's a guy that wants my input, or let's say an auction house or something that wants verification, and in some cases, that watch is $1 million+ and like a guy's ready to hit a wire button, right? And it also drives a little bit of anxiety too, because in some of these things you're really paying attention to the finest details, and that detail will make or break a piece. And the vintage watches have moved really into an asset class of their own. Matter of fact, there are funds that literally pour money into vintage watches as an asset class.
Yeah, full on. So, I mean, that's when it gets scary. This area. I mean, I find vintage watches, it's like a minefield, really. It's pretty terrifying when you're dealing not only with the quality of the watches you're handling, but then also the prices that are being asked for it. A lot of the time, it's big money, and it can get out of hand. I can imagine it's tough.
It's so funny. I'm laughing at this because like it makes me laugh because like Zane's like crafty and untailored, sponsored by Houdinki.
Yeah, Zane's cool. I love Zane's great.
I mean, wish.
Generally,
Can you call him, because I would love to get a check.
I tell you, Zane is the best when it comes to comments. We see him all the time. It's always. I mean, some days he loves Rolex, other days he likes Patek, and so it is. It's great.
This is so fun. I love it.
But as it is, I mean, geez, again, this format is so unlike how we normally run the show. So I hope everyone's enjoying the different take.
It's great. I love it. Yeah.
What else did I want to say? How should I? Are there any other questions that we asked? I don't know. As it is, there were some great questions. Again, ask some more questions about what you. I think there was something about Dear Artifact who asked a question.
Yeah, somebody was talking about maybe like the history behind things, and that's the thing that is really interesting. I mean, I've had this fortunate opportunity to find and uncover some of these watches that are just they drip with history. And
Yeah.
you hold some of these things in your hand and you're like, holy crap, like this was on this mission from a military perspective, or this was this person's watch and this sat next to so and so. I mean, some of those pieces are probably some of the most memorable. And I think the other thing too is, you and I have met. I love the story behind how we met. Do you want to tell the story?
I'd love to, yeah. Let me just,
Yeah.
there's a great question from Ed saying, does a Grail watch need to be hard to purchase either by cost or availability? Can it be a Grail if you can easily afford it and walk straight to an AD to pick it up? Fully. And I think that's one stigma. Again, the whole social stigma behind having a solid gold Zenith Daytona as the cover says it all. It doesn't have to be that. That's what we envisage. Again, the broader area of the community, a Grail watch can be something like a Seamaster, and you should just love it, because that's the joy about this hobby. It doesn't have to be expensive. I find it funny how the Grail watch is determined, as it's defined, as this piece to end all collecting. That's what seems to be the underscore with a lot of, in the community. It's great when you look online at how people consider Grail watches. A lot of the time it's this enigmatic thing that ticks all the boxes that you could sell your whole collection off for and have that as your only piece, and that's all you need. Find that to be quite a bold statement for a game like this, what we're involved in.
Yeah, and Geezer said, the concept of Grail, it's all subjective.
For sure.
I would define it as the watch that would end the itch. And oh my gosh, like Geezer, if I could find that watch, like I don't
think it's possible.
I would retire,
Yeah.
But I think that's the fun thing about collecting watches, whether it be vintage or whatever, and or to figure out like what that Grail is I think that these things are so tangible. And that's the thing, we're talking about cars and like all those other things, like, a 75 911S drives different than an 84 Carrera versus like, a 993. Same thing with wearing, let's say like
kingpins and link pins and air cooled versus water cooled and the whole.
Totally. Yeah. You're like, oh, it's a Porsche 911, but it's its own thing. Right. And same thing with watches. It's like, if you look at like the world of Daytonas, for example, like wearing a big red 6263 is different than wearing like, let's say a Paul Newman reference 6239. Even in the world of subs, like wearing, a Tudor blue Snowflake is different than wearing, let's say like an early, lollipop, Tudor Submariner that looks more like a Rolex, maybe even like, gilt dials versus matte dials. Right. And so I think that, for me, there are definitely watches that like check that box. But I think the thing that I've noticed about myself and in my collecting journey, because I think it is a journey, is that it's always changing,
Yeah. And your taste, and it's not so much your taste changes, it's also through age and, your eyes maybe wear down or you don't, it's great. I mean, we can talk about it to death. I'm getting such good questions like Dear Artifact saying a Grail watch can be something that doesn't even exist yet in the case for me. And Dear Artifact, he's on Instagram as well. I've put his tag in the chat. Again, guys, I'm so sorry. Me and getting to the chats tonight, I don't know how good it'll be. But his is a Tudor Ranger. Is that what they call it? It's like a 7... the Explorer, I never get it right, the reference. It's like 7995 or something, 7.
There's a few of them.
Yeah. I think he's talking about the no date variant that looks very much like a 1016, except it's all clean and clear. Tudor's variant of that.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many good comments. Guys, I'm sorry that I'm missing them so much. As it is, Showcase says your passion and views on the hobby is great. It's a pleasure, Showcase. We try our best. And Orange Hand, wondering if Cam has advice on assuring originality of vintage pieces with laser welding, advanced dial restoration techniques.
That's a great question.
Pieces to wear rather than minty. So should you rather appreciate the stuff that has had its, it's been beaten by a sandblaster instead of it looking like it's brand spanking new? Good point.
Yeah, so that comes down to like preference and taste, in my opinion, right? Because what you deem is something that like checks the box and kind of tickles your fancy, so to speak, is going to be totally different than the next guy, right? And I think I have a broad overview of those types of things because I see so much of this stuff. When we get a watch, there are watches that I always look for original pieces, meaning that the case hasn't been polished or
the full set, the whole deal.
Yeah, but also at the same time, there's kind of this this parallel there where it's like, okay, you know, do you buy the watch that has box and papers that is also kind of like polished and a little bit beat up and pay that premium just for the box and papers?
Yeah.
You know, because you can't wear the box or papers, right?
Yeah.
So
I find it so funny. That's another thing. It's dividing the collector from the everyday guy who just wants to enjoy the aesthetic. I mean, here's a good example. What is this? It's a 321. It looks like I'm really bad at naming my Speedmasters. This is not an applied Omega logo. It looks like the dial has a step to it, so that's something. Is this post moon or you know? Again, me and my references.
That's going to be a 70s era Speedy, so that would be post moon. Yeah. One of the indications there is the non dot next to 90.
Okay. It's not above
so that would probably be like a 74, 75. There's a step in the dial. So yeah, I would say mid 70s. Yep.
And just talking about that, where I'm someone who doesn't want to hoard these things. I'm someone who, I mean, I'm all about scratches on watches. So that context of someone coming in not wanting the provenance behind it, say, and just wanting to wear the piece for what it is and, you know, appreciate the dings and scratches. It's interesting how some really do try and hone in on, you know, the cleanest looking examples, and if there's a little nick on the bezel, is that going to detract?
Yes, for sure. And, you know, here's the other thing. I think that there's a question about like dial restoration and also like case. And I think that was a really, really good, you know, a really good comment and or question, because that is something that is definitely prevalent in the vintage world. And going back to that, I think that, again, it kind of depends on what you want out of the watch. If you find an example and you want to do a case restoration, there are guys within our industry that are, they almost do it better than factory.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. For me personally, I don't, and this is just a personal preference. I don't like to see that in my watches. I like originality. I'm okay with a ding. I'm okay with a watch. And I mean, and in some cases, the watches are 30, 40, 50 years old. Like, you know, the watch has been polished, right? Because that was just what you did back then. But if the watch has that vibe and it has kind of that, you know, symmetry to it, then cool. Like, you know, that's okay for me, right? I look kind of for a balance in terms of patina and wear and all that stuff. But there are those cases too where, you know, the dial's never going to be produced again. You know, the case is never going to be produced again. And if the watch has already been polished and it's not a prime mint example, and that's something that you want, if you really want to look at those, you know, chamfers down the lugs, or, you know, if a watch actually does need a physical restoration, in some cases, I think it benefits the watch. I think, you know, the answer to that, and I'm not trying to not answer it, but I think you have to look at it on a case by case basis. And in some cases, you know, a watch is so unique and so rare that it just needs that. Like, you know, if a lug is like bent in sideways and, you know, it's a rare, you know, triple date calendar moon phase Patek in yellow gold, and it's one of 4 ever known in existence, like, you're going to have to bend the lug back out, you know? So, yeah.
It's some great, and again, these questions are great. Zane, guys, again, I can't address all these questions in the chat. I'm trying my utmost, but as it is, any question directed to me, I'll try my best to read it as good as possible. But this is good. I mean, again, we're just warming up. This is the first hour. All of you who I'm not addressing in the chat, I'm trying my absolute best, but it's, as you can imagine, it's a struggle. I want to get us both talking as much as possible as the show goes through. Oh, we were going to talk about how we met each other. That would have been pretty good.
Yes, that's cool.
Let me do that quickly. I want to show, let me just minimize this for a sec. So I took a break from the channel. Again, I'm using a new microphone, everyone, if you've been asking the question, and I don't know what the audio levels are like. So apologies if there's popping and all sorts of noises, but yeah, just trying to get it. It took at least 5 hours to try and get this right, to get the sound right.
Hey, Zane, by the way, it's 14, Zane, 14 years in.
Anyway, so I was taking a break from, and you can find all of these links in the description of the show, if you like. If you're watching this on YouTube now, there's a drop down that says show more. You can get all the links to his channel. I've linked his YouTube, Instagram, and website. What was happening was, it must have been at least almost a year ago now, I think. I was just taking a break from the hobby and looking at other channels, and I stumbled on, I remember the exact video. It was this. What is on my wrist? 1958 Big Crown, reference 6538. I think we have photos of it later on. And then straight after that, it was the 5512. And these two videos, I'd never seen these watches so well, you know, not only looked after, but the presentation was good. You find them in photographs and stuff, but you never see them in hand, you know, being worn on the wrist. A lot of the time they're very static. There's no like background. So again, this is just a collage of all these YouTube videos. And from there, I made a very like useless, like a 2-minute video saying to the audience, if I could, everyone check out Craft and Taylor's channel. And that's really where it all began. And you told me the story of how you suddenly got new followers on the page, and yeah, go for it. Tell the rest of the story. I don't know that part.
Yeah. So, you know, the YouTube stuff is something that is kind of new for us. And one of the reasons why we have our showroom and do what it is that we do is so that you can physically, you know, come in and experience some of this stuff. Because looking at something online is one thing, and obviously, you know, we're in a different time and place today than we were, you know, a year ago. But I you know, we have, you know, guys and gals that come in and they try stuff on and they're like, you know what, I really wanted this watch. I thought this was my grail, so to speak. And I tried it on and I just didn't vibe with it, right? And so I think that, again, we want to facilitate that kind of experience and share that feeling, something that is very dear to me, with, you know, our customer base and stuff like that. And one of the ways that I figured I could do that was by creating this kind of like little show called What Is On My Wrist, where basically it's just the stuff that I'm wearing. It's not a scripted thing. You know, I kind of just talk about stuff off the cuff, and it's like, hey, this is what I'm vibing on this week. Additionally, I do wear a lot of the watches in my personal collection and out. Like, I'll wear a Paul Newman, I'll wear a Big Crown, whatever. I'm a believer that things should be worn, right? Like, I love again, kind of bringing this back to cars, but like, I love high mileage Porsches because those cars were driven, and in order to maintain a car, or in order for a car to achieve a high mileage, you have to maintain it. So whoever owned that car before had put love and energy and really cared about it, versus just like, you know, putting it in the garage and kind of polishing with a diaper on the weekend. So, so, you know, that was the What Is On My Wrist thing is just kind of a way to, you know, just talk about the stuff that I'm enjoying and kind of share it with people in a format that I thought was kind of fun and unique. And the fun thing is that we've been able to connect with a lot of great people. Like,
always. I mean, I've met some of them too, and it was a good time. Yeah, I remember.
So anyways, so I think I was in London. I was delivering a watch to a customer in London, and kind of one of the fun but also tricky parts of doing what I do is, you know, some of these watches have a tremendous amount of value to them, and so it's easy. Yeah, it's easier to put it on my wrist and fly it to wherever it needs to go. And also sometimes if I'm looking at something, I need to, you know, I can get about 95% of the way there with, you know, with looking at it through pictures, but I have to physically like loop it and use a bunch of other things that you kind of saw when we spent some time in London together. But I was over there in London and I was dropping a watch off to a customer, and I can't remember how, maybe I just put it like on like my Instagram stories or something, and you hit me up and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not that far away. And I'm like, dude, come with me. I'm going watch hunting in the arcades and I would love to meet you. And so we ended up meeting up, and
it was a good time. It really was a good time. And then going to the Soho Club afterwards and hanging out. There's a few guys in the chat
that was so much fun.
There are a few guys who are also here in the chat who were with us that evening when we went out. It was such a good time. And just hearing, I mean, I'm not in the dealing. I'm going to switch over to your Instagram just to show that off. There was mention that you're a movie buff. I think that's pretty clear. It's actually phenomenal seeing, I mean, Frank Sinatra, I didn't know what watch he wore, but if I click on this, it won't let me in because I'm not logged in. But you know, this is, the nice thing is that these photos are all Instagram worthy, and it's great seeing that on display. But seeing how that process, it's such a different world. I can tell you, I was quite reserved. Listen, I mean, when we went into some of these shops, we're talking Burlington Arcade, and I was quite on edge with the way people were trying to push watches on us and asking for the watches on your wrist. I mean, you had that gorgeous 1675. Remember that, the Castro, that we called it.
Yep.
And they were just, pushing and asking how much you want for it, what will you take now, and all of this. And I found
Yeah, it was kind of funny.
I found it quite like scummy in a way. Is that a good enough word expression to say it? That it's not genuine. It doesn't feel like a genuine experience. Money is money. It's cold. It's just the way it is. So yeah, that was one thing that woke me up to this industry, that it's so different to just the, we all like to think it's all beautiful with white gloves and these gorgeous boutiques, but the world of, oh, thank you, Instagram. Thank you. I'm going to close off this then. It's very different behind the scenes, seeing how dealing works next to what you hear from the boutiques, and it's all champagne and glory and roses. It is a different side to it, which at least I've learned. Travel clock salesman Jeb. Oh, I love that. That's become a meme now, but yeah, we can chat about that at a later stage. So that's the one experience that I had, that I woke up to, at least. I found it very different to the usual, how we would.
There's some cool stuff, like Mark is saying, is that Clem Burke, the drummer for Blondie? And I think that's something that's been really fun for us too. Is I love that. I'm really into the history side, and I love seeing watches in movies, and like it's. I think that, again, for me, like these things kind of can invoke an experience, but I like seeing it's like looking at fonts on a dial, right? You can see that there are stylistic elements of an era that are in some cases in a watch. It's like looking at a Royal Oak or a Nautilus, like that. Those watches came out of a very specific period in time where those designs were new, but almost kind of like now today they're at icon status, and they're their own, they stand on their own, right? And so I like that. I like kind of sharing that with history, and I like the pop culture behind things. And
I mean, that's one thing about California. It's very much, I mean, again, we're from completely different worlds. I'm from South Africa. I'm from the deepest of Africa, the lowest of Africa, should I say, right on the tip. And comparing it to a world like California, I've done a lot of business with Californians in general, and it seems like that is often the case, where it's all about keeping with, I mean, it's just the fast-paced nature of everything. It's a different galaxy in itself, and pop culture plays in a lot, especially Los Angeles. Everyone is in that same kind of mindset, and I've been scrolling around your page just listening. So I hope that's been okay. I hope everyone's seeing this fine. Again, I'm most definitely not experienced with this format, but we're getting somewhere. We need to get back on track, though. I mean, we've got I don't know how many pieces we've been through, but as it is, again, I should have said this in the beginning, but the photography, you've had Hodinkee asking you for these photos in the past, so I'm sure we can say it's pretty good. Mind blowing on this side. I don't know how well it is for.
Well, I was just thinking about this. Maybe what I could do is set up like get like Ben to follow Zane on Instagram, because we're so close. Me and the Hodinkee team.
Hodinkee fam. Oh, geez. Yeah,
it's an interesting time for watches too. I think there's definitely a separation between like producing something new, like the watch companies themselves, like producing something, and then ultimately these things being an icon in their own right. And I think it's probably hard for the watch companies today to, like, you're a manufacturer, it's like, how do you recreate the Daytona? How do you recreate the GMT?
I know.
It's kind of a double-edged sword.
That needs to be, that's one of the main questions I wanted to ask you. We could actually ask it now. We're like an hour into the show already. I tell you, time period, when it comes to running these shows, 2 hours evaporates so fast.
No doubt.
I wanted to ask you the question, what is your, and I guess this leads into the whole idea of, how did I say? What is a good way of mentioning the question? Okay, this is pretty clear. What is your favorite time period for watch design? With a caveat, though, we're barring the 50s, not allowed to say 50s, because that is where basically everything sort of began and transcended from into the next stage. So what's your favorite time period of watch inspiration and design and styling?
I kind of like that. I like the 1960s.
Mm.
The 50s for me would be, you see like a lot of like Patek Calatravas, and you don't see a lot of the sport watch stuff.
Mm.
I am more of a sport watch guy myself. Like I have some dress watches in my collection. I've got a few Cartiers and a couple of JLCs and things
Mm.
like that. That would be considered more the stereotypical type of dress watch, but I
Okay.
like the 60s because I like all the stuff that was happening in the 60s. You
Yeah.
had, I like that era, Queen and Newman, and I think that it's just cool. These guys were like actually doing their own stunts and driving their own cars, and
Yeah.
everything was still on film, and that's it was real, right?
Mm.
The 80s are kind of interesting too. I think that we see a lot of stuff out of the late 1970s into the 1980s from a watch design perspective that's really fun and cool. Speaking about watches that you can wear and that are vintage, but maybe in more the neo-vintage category, some of my favorite watches are the transitional references out of Omega and or Rolex in the sport watch category. Like I really love like the later era Rolex 5513s.
Yeah.
So
What I find fascinating, just to build onto that, talking about 1950s. I don't know if I'm correcting the watch history. I'm by no means a history buff in this area, but when I think 1950s, I think the original Submariners, this
Mhm.
Explorer, another example. I think there are just too many stereotypical watches that came out of that time. What else? We have the day dates. We have the
Yep.
Blancpain 50 Fathoms. We have, it just goes on and on. Every brand has its. I mean, the Memovox from JLC, I think, came out around that time. And 60s, transitioning to the 60s, we start going from the quote unquote prototype phase to something a bit more refined, as we saw now when we got to the 1016 finally at that the later stages of the 50s, early 60s. All the little quirks had been removed, and like saying that the 5513. Do you prefer the non-chronometer rated variant of a 5513? I find that interesting. Or is that the
Yeah,
5512s were, hold on, the 5513 wasn't chronometer rated, if I remember.
that's correct. Yeah. So the 5512 was a superlative chronometer
Yeah,
rated watch, and then the 5513 was quote unquote the poor man's version of that.
yeah,
Um, which is funny to me. I also found that it really interesting that Rolex was producing a chronometer rated dive watch, and then also they were producing a watch that was non-chronometer rated. And the thing that's interesting is like why were they doing that? I think that the answer to that simply is that there were underwater scientific experiments
yeah.
that required a chronometer versus something that was just kind of time
Yeah,
only. But they're both very,
maybe it
very.
was the diving standards of the time. They probably changed.
Mhm.
I mean, we saw the variance in depth rating happening in the 60s too. So maybe at that point they didn't need to prove that they were chronometer certified, because it was were they even I don't know the depths with the movements themselves and everything. But as it is, there was a great question by Glenn saying, "Do you think the most common Grail watches are sports watches or dress watches?" Very good question. Majority,
I
I
think
would
it's maybe
say.
a
I'd say sports.
yeah
Sports has a majority, but
sports.
then
Yeah.
when you get into, if you're someone in the high end, quote unquote, high end space, who only enjoys the finer watches in the dress category, then probably dress. Sports, I would say, most definitely takes at least 75-80% of that cake for most
hmm
people. I
Yeah.
want
I
to talk
mean,
about
even if
this.
you look at like recent auctions, like the GMTs have been really really heavy and hot right
Oh,
now.
it's a
I would
laugh.
say that I'm getting a lot of call on. Oh, this is a great question that popped up. I'm going to answer that in a second. But
Yeah, cool.
there's a lot of like gilt watches, for example, are I'm seeing a lot of trending around gilt watches, like gilt GMTs, gilt 5513s. They've been around, but I think there was kind of a craze around the matte dial era watches, like Maxi era 5513s and those watches. But I think it's a mix of both. I think it's watches with intense complications that are the typical Grail watches, and intense complications are typically going to be found in more of the dress watches.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then you have the sport watches. It's the Daytonas, the GMTs, the subs. I would say gold is definitely something that we've seen a trend in, especially in the sport watch category.
yeah,
Part of the reason for that is just the sheer less. There's just a small number of gold sport watches compared to silver watches because of their application. So
yeah.
those watches are inevitably more rare and limited in production because for every gold Daytona that was produced, there was probably 30 to 50 produced in steel. So you have a
Big divide.
yeah, big divide there.
It's
There's
a
a
great,
really good
great point.
question.
Great point, by the way, about most of the time we see dress watches pushing the technology forward. It's almost like the dress watches are the prototypes, and then that technology is then pushed into. We think of Patek and we think of the Nautilus. They now have the same complications that you see on most Calatravas. They get transplanted in, and I want to leave on the Nautilus for a second because there was such a good question about this, and I think we're kind of warmed up, 75 or so minutes into the show. And again, all of you in the chats, I'm sorry that I'm missing you all. I am most definitely trying to keep the show rolling as well as addressing all of you there. This was a great question, and I'm going to try and take a breath and ask this. First, there was a question about the 55711 just being a Grail watch for the sake of it, or is there some merit to that? I think you could probably answer that in a few lines, Cam, while I just look up this question that I put down. Here it is. Okay, I said, what precisely is the difference between a stylistic choice that has been hyped up over time and one with intrinsic legitimacy and merit, one not hyped up? So I guess what we could say is, next to something like the Nautilus is a good example. It's a piece that at this point in time, we know what the demand is like and everyone's going for it. Does it deserve merit for what it is? Because next to the Royal Oak, I don't believe it does. As it's funny. Tell me your opinion on the Nautilus. That's a good start.
Well, the history behind it is really cool, right? So, I mean, Jensen designed both the Royal Oak first, and then he designed the Nautilus. I think, the Nautilus is interesting in its own way because it's kind of almost like the perfect watch in many cases. And I think that that's probably why it has a Grail status, whether it be, a brand new 5711 or a 3600 series or 3700 series, 3800 series, whatever Patek you want to get into, but on the Nautilus side. But what's interesting there is that, it's a sports watch that can also be a dress watch. It's very thin. And I think that that's kind of why it's become an icon of design, which also leads it to be something that is timeless and ultimately very much desired.
Okay.
I think that the hype around new Nautilus being so overpriced and kind of that Grail, I think it does have merit. I mean, it has merit because it exists, right? I mean, it's not Patek isn't like pulling the strings behind the scenes. It's the market that has deemed that to be an icon and ultimately a Grail. And so I think that go ahead.
I definitely want to jump in and counter that debate. This should be fun. There was a great question by Chi-Town, California, asking about L series, thoughts on the last series of L serial 5513 Submariners. Can you keep that in your mind for a second? Actually, no, let's get that question through. Thoughts on the last series of L serial 5513s?
Well, so two things. One, the L series is basically the end of the 5513 before they went to the 14060. So it's basically the last series of 5513 produced by Rolex. And it's an end of an era. Is there merit in that becoming an icon or a Grail watch? I would say yes. Typically, if you're looking at things from kind of more of like the scientific, technical standard, the bookend watches always tend to be very, very collectible. And the reason why is because there's limited production numbers typically with the bookend pieces, either at the beginning of a reference range or at the end. And then there's typically special attributes that are associated with those watches as well. In some cases, the L series again is the last of the 5513, and there's just very few of them. I think I've had maybe one or two out of, I don't even know how many 5513s I've had, a couple hundred probably. So yeah, I think that they will remain collectible. And the reason why they'll remain collectible is because they're an end of an era, they're a bookend watch, and there is just not that many of them. Also, the other thing I think that it kind of determines collectability in some cases is the condition. So at that time, a 5513 being an L series, at the end of production, think about it like this. Like if you went to like, let's say, let's talk cars again. If you went to the auto dealer and they had like last year's model, there were this like new improved, new body style, new increased, blah, 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 blah. Would you go buy the last one or the new one? You'd probably be more apt to buy the new one. So in that time frame, these watches were definitely still being used for their intended purpose, which was, diving and that kind of stereotypical sport watch sense. And thus the reason why they're rare is because Rolex is kind of phasing that watch out and moving out of production to pay for the new watch, which was the 14060. Matter of fact, 1990 14060s are very desirable. Because
hold on a sec, you had a bit of an audio spike there. You went a little bit robot, but I think we're fine. I think we're back in order. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Oh dear. I think it was working a second ago. I don't know. Maybe Zane's on the other end trying to get into your system. I want to just hold on to this question about the Nautilus because it's going to slip my mind. And we're talking about this watch being this falls into the category of Grail, and I think it's very important to address as we are talking about the subject. You say that it's a great piece because it's a sports watch. There's mention in the chat about it being a one of the Pateks that you can wear on a daily basis, no problem. But I just think when we look at like the AP Royal Oak, for example, as this prototype to this piece, I believe that the Royal Oak was the prototype that established all of this craziness around steel sports in the 70s and how it evolved. When I think sports watch, I think it needs to be something that really is very extremely durable. And a watch like this, to me, I don't believe it to be one. You can't take this mountain climbing, say. Would you want to take this watch up a mountain? Or, would you really want to swim with this piece, all things considered?
Well, I think you definitely could, right? I mean, you could swim with it. And I think that was kind of Genta's, interpretation of the design. At that time, when these watches were produced, the quartz crisis was happening. And the funny thing is that, and yes, the AP, the Royal Oak is the precursor to the Nautilus. It was a watch that actually didn't really sell that well. Like, for example, if you look at Audemars Piguet 5402 A series, they're watches that are in demand because there's just so few of them. They just didn't produce that many of these watches. And everybody thought like that Audemars Piguet was, crazy for investing in Genta and doing that. And I had a conversation with Christian over at Theo and Harris some months back, and we talked extensively about, if Genta didn't design the Royal Oak, like I don't think AP would even exist today, because the watches that AP were producing, although there are some really cool vintage APs out there that are not Royal Oaks, they were kind of, there wasn't really anything innovating, and they weren't really innovating, and they also just, there wasn't like that cornerstone iconic piece to the brand like the Royal Oak is now. But going back to the Nautilus, I think, you can. I think the idea was that it's not, a purpose-built sport watch, but the idea being that, you could take this watch into the water. You could also wear this watch with a suit because it is so thin and kind of designed in a way that is ergonomic to, I think a wide array of situations, both from a physical perspective, like the ergonomics of the piece are very comfortable, but also at the same time, something that, offers flexibility in use application, meaning it's not a dress watch, but if you had this on say, a black tie event or whatever, like it wouldn't be that out of place. And also if you were, let's say, like on a boat or hopping in a pool or something like that, then this watch is water resistant, and it's a watch that also pays homage to
holes and all the rest.
So yes, but is it like that purpose-built tool watch where you're like be doing decompressions? No, I mean, where you're going to be tracking multiple time zones?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
There was a great question again from Rich Buddy. He sent in a super chat, and he was just saying, just to address, said, thanks for the 1016, Cam. This is Rich. He just picked up a 1016 from you. He said, my intention on meeting you was to have the watch properly explained to me. Can you do that now? Explain the SVC dial, etc. And again, I hope you're still here, Rich.
Yeah, so it's a really it was a beautiful example. And the thing that I like about the watch that Rich got as well is it's a wearable 1016. You know, there is that fine line between things that you can wear and things that it just kind of boils down to your comfortability, right? It's like, hey, if you know you're wearing an unpolished full set, you know, 1016, is that really going to be the daily driver? To some people, they're going to be comfortable with that, right? If they knock it into a door jamb and put a ding in the bezel or something, like no problem. But I also like having stuff that, for me personally, does have an element of wearability to it, right? Whether it be you know a sub or something like that. I think there are things that you have to be more aware of and more respectful of, just because they are almost at this level an artifact, right? An object of art. So there's kind of that balance between these things. But the watch that Rich picked was a really nice 1016. It was from, I believe, 1967 or 1968. And I think it was like 1.7 million serial. So it'd be like a 67. Yeah. And the service dial, Rolex produced service dials for watches. So for example, if a watch had, let's say if a watch went tropical, if the watch went brown, you sent your watch into Rolex, Rolex would go, oh my gosh, the dial went from black to brown. We're going to pull that out and put in a service dial. So a service dial essentially is a dial that is produced by Rolex to service a watch and ultimately cosmetically bring it back. The other cool thing about the dial that Rich has, it's a very early service dial, so it does possess what we call a semi-frog foot. Yeah. So it had like a really nice, beautiful patina, and then there's tolerances to those things, right? Where you know you're looking at a watch and maybe a service dial and a watch like that does make sense. Maybe you're the guy that wants like every box, paper tag, receipt, perfect, unpolished, it could match bracelet. I think it really kind of depends. So yeah, to answer the question about the service dial, Rolex did produce service dials for a lot of their watches, and that also has a factor on pricing as well. If the watch had the original profile, would be much more expensive. But the other thing is, I've seen some really incredible service dials, Rich that have aged and have.
Sorry, Cam, I have to disrupt you. Your signal is it's getting very robotic again. I don't know. Maybe it's just the heat wave you're having on that side, but it's okay. We can sort of, I don't know. Maybe us talking in shorter bursts would maybe, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I really don't. There was, oh geez, sorry. I'm looking up. Oh God, there's so many comments coming in. I'm sorry, guys, that I'm missing you all. Sorry, keep on going, Cam. Sorry about that. Oh dear.
So yeah, that's kind of the. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, it's good. It's clear.
So yeah, that's kind of the nutshell to style. Additionally,
if
you want to give me a call or what have you, happy to answer any questions.
Oh geez, I don't know if you've moved in the room, Cam, but there's serious disruption. We can hear you, sort of, kind of. It has its moments of breaking up and coming back, but I think it's a little bit of a fluctuation. Again, you can prepare 100 times out of 100 times, and still there's a technological glitch somewhere. So yeah, we can keep rolling on. But I think, oh, Cam's gone. Oh dear. Ladies and gents, we just lost Cam. Okay, well, what I can do in the meantime, while I wait, maybe he's disconnected. This is great. I mean, I'm enjoying the banter. It's different to how we normally run these shows, as most of us could probably guess at this point. Let's see. Is he in the lobby? No device is connected. Oh, geez. Ladies and gents, here I'm thinking I'm going to botch the system, but it seems like Cam's disappeared for the moment. Okay. There was a great question from, I think, BDev mentioned something about selling off watches. Oh, God, the comments are just coming in fast and thin. But as it is, I hope I hope it's been okay. It's a very different change of pace. Again, I haven't been able to address you all in the chat. I've been trying to let Cam talk for once. Let me breathe and listen to everything going on. Let me jump back and see if I can get him back on. Dear me. Add to stream. There he is. Are you back? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. All right.
Let's have a double check. I hope the signal's okay. I've just let you back in, just seeing the stream catch up. Okay, go for it. I don't know what we were talking about. 1016s.
Yes.
Oh God. Again, again, the signal is so choppy. I don't know what it is. Are you in your apartment? Yeah, it has its moments and it's clear, and then it decides to break up.
I'm connected to a good internet signal and the Bluetooth working and all that stuff. So
can
really
everyone
moving around.
Can everyone hear me in the chat? I'd like to know. Is it my side or is it just Cam's side? I really, I really don't know what's happening, what's cracking. But yeah, keep talking, Cam. We can see if we can sort this out. This sucks if it doesn't work. What? There were some more questions. BDev, or who was it, who mentioned a question about the Grail watch should be something that you sell your entire collection off to get.
To get.
And that should be the piece that you hold and maintain, and that should be the one. It's an interesting thought. That was one thing we addressed at the beginning, discussing the whole concept of the Grail watch being the thing to end collecting completely. And it's like that divide of Foreman, thank you. That's very touching. I just got a new microphone. That's probably why. And thanks, Thomas. Just Cam. Okay, I don't know. Cam, you need to keep talking to see if this is going to work.
Testing 1 2. Can you hear me? Okay.
I think so. Yeah, we can at times. Okay. We can, and then it decides to cut. Interesting point though. That's the stereotypical definition of a Grail watch is something. I mean, this was the cover photo, darling, that we used, and another example like the Blue Submariner, and so it is. Yeah. Are you still there, Cam? I really hope I haven't lost you.
Still here.
What is another good question? There was Eric asking me about it's a Sennheiser that I'm using for a change. Sennheiser apparently has good microphone quality.
They do. We actually just upgraded to Sennheiser mics for our YouTube. We had similar audio issues with some of the other mics tonight.
Audio is the worst. It's disgusting. The consistency you just cannot get right.
Somebody said you had like a really good voice, a very soothing voice, and I would agree. You kind of have like a
making me blush, guys. You're making me blush. Sennheiser, almost German. Yeah, we love German stuff. There was a question. There was another good one that I had lined up for you. Okay.
Oh, so I think we were talking. Somebody was asking. Let's see. I'm kind of scrolling back up.
And everyone who's joining again, I'm missing you all in the chats. I'm trying my utmost to keep up with all of you, but the chat is going wild. And yeah, there was one question that I wanted to get to Cam.
Sure.
And it was, barring everything, this is actually very good for an underlying thing. This might take a bit of thought, but barring everything, the watches that you've procured, that you've seen over time, you've handled all sorts, let's put it that way. What would be your Grail watch? Do you have one, exactly one, that you could end all collecting with at the end of the day?
Oh gosh, that's I get asked that so much. I mean, I'll say this. I'll share a really interesting story. The watch that started my collection, I actually sold it. I don't have the watch that started my collection. And what's interesting is I was in a period of collecting early on where I just had graduated from that. Like, this meter's first 5.5.
Sorry, Cab. Again, the signal is just having a bad day there. We can hear you, though. I think you remember you told us in the beginning that it was a 5513 from 67, and
it was. Yep.
I just heard you said you sold it in order to probably fund a lot of your other purchases, getting into the hobby and all the rest. And I would imagine that that's the piece that you would aspire to pick up, right? If you could find that one again, and that be the one and done, the one that started it, the one that ended it.
Yeah, exactly. So now that watch can kind of be my Grail, because kind of started this adventure for me. And, I think it's going back to the story and the adventure of it is that it's ultimately finding those watches and appreciating those things, maybe even having Grail be something that has more sentimental value than just kind of like that, like external kind of value to somebody else.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, it's Paul Newman, right? There's other watches in my collection, you know.
I've got an idea,
that
Cam.
would,
Sorry to disturb you again. Is someone in the office using like serious bandwidth at the moment? This is my African mind thinking right now, because in Africa, you have terrible signal anywhere you go. Is anyone doing like a download or something crazy? I don't know if you could like shout at the office, turn your Wi-Fi off or something.
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. There's nobody here. So,
jeez.
such a bummer.
It's so terrible. I tell you, technology. Just when we think we're getting somewhere, so it decides to trip up. I don't know if my side's the same. If I think it's someone saying it sounds okay this side, but can you hear me okay?
I do. Yeah.
Oh,
I can hear you just fine.
It's so weird. But anyway, yeah, talking about collecting again. So the one and done watch, you were talking about Newman's and what you have in your collection, what you've experienced.
Yeah, I've been really collecting like interesting day dates recently, which is weird for me because I'm not really a gold guy.
Yeah.
But I really like them for some reason. I think I'm at that point in my collecting. I really like exotic stone dials. You see a lot of that on Craft and Taylor. If you follow us on Instagram and stuff like that, we've been able to acquire some of these really incredible stone dials. And I like the idea of Rolex putting a
Sorry again, Gav. I don't know what is going on. Maybe is there like a way you could reboot the stream or something, anything, any possible way?
Let's try it. Do you want to try it out? We could reboot it.
I mean, as if how would it work? I've given you the link. Is there a way that you could log out of the show and come back? Maybe possibly. I don't know what is the best solution. Turn off the Wi-Fi and jump back to. Geez, I don't know. It's so annoying. It was so clear for the last hour and a half, and now all of a sudden it's gone full robot voice. But anyway, what else should we? Again, I'm getting so flustered with all these comments. It's great. Again, oh god, shake the computer.
The router.
Shake the computer and tap the side of it firmly. Jeb says, "Wrap it up and talk Grail Watches with me." B-Dev is asking, what should we do? We can keep just flicking through these pieces. Again, the whole idea is to have the commentary over these watches, but I just really hope this doesn't like.
You see the let's see.
Yeah, there's some saying I can't understand Cam. It's intolerable. Like you sound. It's gone full on robot voice again in the.
All right, let me jump out and then I'll drop back in.
Okay.
It looks like I've dropped out actually, which is weird. You're in the show.
It sounds clear now. Hold on. I know exactly what it is. You've got the YouTube link open as well as StreamYard, right?
Yep.
Close the YouTube link. That'll probably do it. And there we go. That might be it. The YouTube is probably causing the download on top of it. I don't know.
Oh, it could be. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, geez.
Because my YouTube wasn't actually what you're showing. You're showing a pole router right now, and it was showing the 1016 on the stream.
What a disaster! Sorry about that, ladies and gents. Again, first time we've done this. First time I've ever had a guest, so it's all just on the roll. But again,
that was an incredible AP 5402. I really loved that watch.
Yeah. Where was I there?
I know what I was going to say.
Yeah.
If Zane is in LA, and if Zane wants to come to our office and look at my collection, I will open my vault to Zane. So Zane, I'm giving you an open invite to come to Craft and Tailored. We will socially distance. I'll mask up.
Yeah.
And I will show you my collection, which I've never showed anybody before. So you're more than welcome to come to LA. We can talk watches. I'll make you a latte. I might put some arsenic in it beforehand. Kidding.
I wanted to, and everyone's saying that the sound is good now. I tell you, it was just that download that you're having on YouTube at the moment. That's so funny. Anyway, we're back on track. Jamie, thank you for the super chat, and yeah, everyone in the chat at the moment. Again, apologies for the delay and the write up and everything. Let's get to that question again.
Yeah. Sure.
All things thrown, sell the entire collection that you have. And again, talking about your collection, I guess we could do that, but that'll take a bit of time, I suppose. Talking about selling your entire collection, what's the one watch? And you think it would be the I see Robert Wood saying, I see a career for IDGuy on the help desk. That is so funny. Yeah, that was my past job, guaranteed. No, that's just my African mind, African mentality. So sell the entire collection. You would probably, if you could find that 67 Submariner again, being the watch that got you into this, that would be the one you would hold, right? That's the one that wins.
I'd never sell it again. Yeah,
Oh,
I
God.
would.
Oh no, it's doing it again. Yeah, it's going bad again. Yeah.
What the heck?
I think there's someone sponging off your Wi-Fi right now. Oh, geez. Well, we gave it a good shot. 99 minutes, almost on the 100th minute, and I mean we've bantered away at most things. Yeah, are you still there?
I'm still here. Yep.
Oh, geez, I laugh.
You know what?
Yeah.
You know, let me try to do this. I'm gonna log out.
Yeah.
Rejoin live stream. Let's see if we can just read it that way.
Okay.
Just give me 1 sec.
I hardly caught a word of that, but I have my phone next to me, so if you send me a message, I'll just let me know and jump on. I don't know if Cam's still here. Is he? There he is. Okay. Geez, guys, it's been a struggle. Apologies, really, for this. This is first time reboot, reconnect, first time using this audio setup. I hope you're enjoying the photography, though, and everything else that's been going on behind the scene. Let's see. Back to StreamYard. There he is again, adding to stream. Okay. We can hear you, right?
Yep. That's good.
And again, the
Can you hear me
download.
okay?
Yeah, your camera's on. We can kind of sort of hear you. Hold on again. Just keep chatting.
All right, hold on. Testing 1, 2. So on 50 fathoms. Is it still screwed?
Again, it's having its moments. Yeah.
It's so funny. It's so weird. We just redid it.
I know. Having these again, ladies and gents. Sorry about the technical difficulties. You can never see. James Conn saying, I can see a relationship forming between Zane and Cam. Guys, I'm gonna try. I don't know. Maybe I could send Cam a message or mute the show for a sec while I just catch up. And there's talk about XX vids. Yeah, the photography is phenomenal. StreamYard again. Okay, we're back again. Let's see. How's it sounding?
How's it?
Nope, worse than ever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try one thing on that. You know what? I'm gonna connect my AirPod.
Okay. Wait. Let's see. He's disconnected the AirPods. I'm just checking in the. He's using wireless. Okay, now he's disconnected completely. I tell you, Streamlord should be a lot clearer and cleaner with this. Hold on a sec, ladies and gents. This is here we go again. Adding to stream. How are we doing?
How are we doing? Is that better?
I think so. Oh no, why am I opening this up again? So now this is not through the headphones. This is through. That probably makes a difference.
Yep, just through the regular old computer here.
That actually sounds much better. Can I say?
Let's do it this way.
Yeah. Again, everyone who's in the chat, apologies for the delay. This is technology. Is what happens. And Thomas sends. By the way, this is a great tutor. I think Cam wants to address this. IDGuy. Oh, that's good BS. This tutor being made for the Canadian Navy, right? Please elaborate a bit more on this because it's very unique and funny. Before you get into it, the inspiration behind the Black Bay 58s that we see, the snowflake hand with the round plot, I guess we could very much link it to this piece as the inspiration, right?
Yeah, definitely. So this is a really interesting watch. It's
no winning today, guys. Cam again. It's having its moment again.
Wow. Yeah, I've fan on my end, and that we're pushing this across the probably some wires underneath the ocean.
Yeah, I really don't know. I don't. What should we do? Do you reckon we should wrap it? Should I carry on the show? What do you reckon is the better call?
Yeah, the audio isn't working, but I think we did a good amount there. I think that there's some good. We had good benchmark, so for sure, if you want to go through some you want, and you can do it on the right hand side for commentary. So if you want you're showing.
Yeah. Yeah, Cam, again, maybe what you could do, I know it's so lame, but I guess you could, if you want, you know, I want to share some more of these pieces for the next, I mean, there's supposed to be a 2-hour show, and we're almost about to hit the 2-hour mark. But, you know, maybe if you want to be in the chat for a while and catch other people there, because I mean, I could barely hear what you were saying a second ago as you were chatting about what we have definitely covered some good points, though, most def. Oh, geez. Again, ladies, the signal is so choppy. Yeah, everyone's saying, you're feeling for me. Everyone's feeling for me at the moment because of what's going on. What do you reckon we should do, Cam?
Why don't we? I can provide in the chat.
Oh God, I think you might have to communicate through the chat, because I am definitely yeah. I can't even hear you. I don't know if anyone else can. Oh, Cam, I'm sorry about this. Really, it is. It's sorry about it. This shouldn't have happened, but technology always gives you the middle finger at the end of the day, right?
It does, yeah.
Maybe I don't know, for the next 15 minutes. Maybe I can just chat to you all in the chat for a little while before the stream ends. I don't know. This was going well. We were getting somewhere, and then it's just as you have probably seen, the variety on offer and the pieces that we're looking at. This is all from Cam's collection. But plan B doesn't work. Join the chat, Cam. Someone's saying, keep on talking, Cam. Let's hear. There he is in the chat. How does... no, the signal is abysmal still. Damn it, that sucks. What should we do? Should I mute you? I don't know. I don't want to seem... It feels very inappropriate that I'm looking through your stuff, talking about it, and not having you on the show.
For it.
Okay. Plan C. That's funny. So what should I do? Should I mute your mic, or what's ideal?
Yeah, can you mute my mic?
Okay. I feel it's so lame. This whole, I really thought it would be so clean and crystal, but we know how tech works. Okay, I'm hitting the mute mic button, Cam. And if you want to try again in the next 5 minutes, let's see. Oh, geez. Okay, I've hit the mute, and I'm really a Cam. I'm sorry about it. This was going to be a time when I wanted us to just address various subjects and questions around the subject. I can have him call on the phone and put him on speaker. Turkey, that's a good idea, but I'm now using a directional mic, and it's right by my mouth, and it might be very awkward if that's the case. The sound is probably going to be poor. We had it all synced up. I can tell you, we've been practicing. We had 2 sessions of practicing how we would get this right and get the recording done properly. Hold on a second. One more small detail to all of you. This has been a wild ride, ladies and gents. I can make it full screen, which might clean up a few technicalities. Again, all of you in the chat, I see Cam saying he's here. I see, I understand. No stress. Still, it's annoying. I mean, I've spent so many hours just trying to get the microphone set up okay, and it's very annoying. Anyway, we had a good 100 minutes. Again, Cam, if you are in the chat, I'll just run through a few of these because there's so many pieces as it is. I don't want to drag on the show for too long. IDGuy, that's a goodie. Discussing this piece, this Big Crown Submariner is actually the piece that got me following Cam in the first place. His YouTube video about this watch, I had never seen it before and thought it would make, oh geez, there's a super chat coming in now. LA internet sucks. Yeah, Cam, really. Apologize. Neo saying, still waiting to see the big money takers put up. Oh, okay, talking about the Paul Newmans, we'll get to those now. This is an example, Big Crown Sub, a 6538 that we talk about often. And Andrew saying, Cam is great, thanks for putting it together. We tried. And I hope in future we can further expand this, talk about other subjects. But what made the show what I liked the idea of is that he has experience in the vintage space. I, on the other side, look at watches from their design perspectives and those details. And it would be nice to look at how we approach various pieces. The one question I wanted to ask Cam, actually, is, and if Cam is still in the chat, what is an example of the question? It was something to do with, let's see if I can find it. No? Talking about the positives and negatives of Grail watches. That's a goodie. No apologies, Demetrius. I have to. I mean, I am the host, and I feel it's quite lame that I'm now having to almost mute him because the sound's so bad. But the question, and thanks for the super chat, guys. Really, Thomas and 73 Math. Fleming novel for Fleming watch. So this, the Explorer 1016. I mean, it's absolute gem. And I wanted to also commend Cam for the level of photography. He's been asked by lots of, bigger names in the industry, should we say, for his photos, especially of the Explorer recently, actually. So talking about the positives and negatives of Grail watches, I don't know if anyone's still here. There's still 200 of you watching, so thank you. One big thing that hit me was, oops, I just hit the microphone. I'm learning to use this new setup. Positives and negatives of Grail watches is obsession. So the word obsession. And sorry, Quinn's saying there was a super chat from Thomas before about you have 20,000, what watch do you buy? For me, with 20,000, I'd put a deposit down on a house personally, but it's a good question. When I think, I would probably, as it is, I want to get into the Rolex seat at the moment. Cam, answer that question if you like. In the Rolex seat, I mean, look at this. This was one of my favorites, actually. I would imagine this piece is right at the end of the 50s, early 60s, and we have a gorgeous rivet bracelet. The quality and the finishing is just sublime. So Cam's saying a stone dial, date 8. People are getting home from work and shopping, 6 p.m. Central. Thank you, Shot in the Dark. Onyx dial. There's so many. I mean, in the Rolex Cam for 20 grand, a 1655, possibly, maybe. In great condition, maybe even a 1016. But I wanted to address this question again. I'm rolling back and forth. With regards to the positives and negatives of Grail watches, I think obsession is the underlying detail for both sides. The positives of obsession is you have this laser-like focus when it comes to hunting for a watch. Like this is a 5508, right? You have this focus that this is the watch you want, and the negative is the disregard for other watches, possibly, maybe. If Grail's about obsession, then that puts me firmly in Lunga. And I agree, Mason. I mean, again, the show was going to be, at first, it was going to be more dynamic, looking at pieces that you maybe suggested, but this is blending. I hope again, the signal connection, been struggling today, ladies and gents. Live stream kaput, Jimmy says. Oh no, are you kidding me? You are kidding me. Oh no, hold on a sec, ladies and gents. Anything stuck? Oh my gosh! Welcome back, guys. This has been a nightmare. There it is, back now. This has really been a nightmare today. I really do apologize for all the technical glitches. This is normally so clean and streamlined. We're live again. It's fine. Thank you, guys. Again, it wasn't as good as we hoped, but as it is. I'll definitely run until midnight here in the UK. That's another, 8 or so minutes. I don't want to drag this on for too long. As it is, we've had a good chat around various subjects and topics, but yeah, I've just enjoyed the idea of having a guest on. I really like the fact that I can listen to someone preach and talk about things instead of me constantly splurging details and reach for the wine. You've earned it, Ed. Thank you. And Robert saying it isn't you, can't be helped. I tell you, technology. But the variety of pieces, I mean, I could just flick through these for ages and ages. It might also be because of the quality of these photos. I don't know if my stream on my laptop's catching up to this. All of these images are 5K in resolution, and that's causing probably a bit of a time delay and all the rest. Okay, there are more questions from Les saying, do we discover our Grail watches, or does the market Grail sellers push these? Very good point. And it lines up with a brilliant question. Again, I want to address it again. MCD was his username, and he said, what precisely is the difference between stylistic choice that has been hyped with one with intrinsic legitimacy and merit, one that's not hyped up? And there is this fine line. We can address all sorts of issues with regards to aesthetics and whether, I mean, I hype up watches like the standard Submariner often. I talk about it. It's built for the sake of legibility. In the 50s when it came out, it was designed with the intention of being a sports watch and a dress watch. Zane saying, just have one watch enthusiast, grey dealers, shot in the dark. Again, all of you. Sorry about this readout. It's been a very different show to normal. So talking about something like the Submariner, which is a watch that's overly hyped. It's spoken about all the time. But in the sense of talking about design and how it was improved and evolved, again, this is a random series of pieces that we're looking at, so it probably won't fall in the line. But there is an area where you can appreciate a watch for its legitimacy when it comes to looking at the design aesthetics, as well as, I guess, it works hand in hand, I guess is the best way for me to say it. My Grail is an IWC engineer, Maestro says. I love this. This is a Mark 12. These bracelets, this beads of rice bracelet, just made such a difference back in the day. Why doesn't IWC bring these out again? And I feel so bad that I'm now looking at Cam's photos without him here. So yeah, I definitely want to call it a show at midnight, because it has been again, it's thrown me off, actually. I hate the fact that a show doesn't work. I'm very much a stickler.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Whoa, where did you come from?
You want to try it now?
Yes. Are you on your phone or something? That's clear.
No, I just love mute. So you want to try?
Back on again. No, it's still choppy. The word is frustrating. Yeah, Cam, I really do apologize. It was working so well for the first hour, and then, or hour and a half, and then it just decided to go, fit hit the shan. Are you there? Or are you back on mute? Carry on.
I went back on mute, but
that sounds good. It sounds good for a moment. Yeah, but I mean, we almost about to hit,
man.
We've almost about to hit our. Sorry, Cam. We've almost about to hit our 2-hour marks. I mean, we might as well. We can call it a day, I think. It was a lot of fun in the beginning, at least. But the photos, I mean, I could just sit in silence and just run through the photos, and everyone would probably enjoy it. There's so many pieces. I mean, again, I didn't want this to be a time when we would just talk over watches, because that would take 16 hours. But
totally.
And again, the sound now is great on your side. I find it hilarious, I tell you. Technology. Totally. But then, I mean, these examples are just phenomenal. I really enjoy when I see a watch that has all the wabi-sabi that you would like, but also has an unpolished case, and the rivet bracelet is tight, and this is an eagle beak 1675, yep. and so it is
underline.
So underline as well. That's important. Yeah. Again, yeah. I'm definitely, when it comes to the specifics, there's a gorgeous Hoya. Yeah, and everyone in the chat, I don't know. It sounds like it's clearing up, Cam, if you're still there.
Yeah, still here. And
it sounds clean and clear now. I just don't get it. Maybe I can ask you another question since we're at it. Good effort, Ed Talk says from both of us. It's a laugh. It's a laugh. I mean, you really should laugh about it. What's another good? I guess I could ask you the question of what do you look for when procuring a watch, but that might be a very long-winded answer, I would say, because there's so much. With something like a Daytona in this situation, a 6.2, 6.2, 6.4, 3.65, I can never get it right.
6.2, 6.3. Yep.
When you look at this piece, we had a look at one actually together. It was I don't know if it was a Sigma dial. It was just a standard black dial. But this kind of piece needs to have all the details scrutinized, right? Do you look for things like box and papers with an example like this?
Yeah, we'll look for box and papers if it's there. But in many cases, these watches were used just as a stopwatch. It was a stainless steel sports stopwatch. I like this one. The bezel shows a little bit of peeling and degradation up at the top, but it's original to the piece, and I like that for the most part, the lume plots were in pretty good condition, and the dial was free of any degradation or scratching, anything like that. Yeah. This was a good one.
It is, and the case is also in really good nick. And there's just so many. I mean, we could spend ages. And then we have this is the Ed White. No, this looks like looks to be one. Oh God, the signal again is choppy. Gone again. Someone says, boy. Anyway, As it is, I mean, we've just almost hit the 2-hour mark. Ladies and gents, I mean, Megan's saying, thanks, Cam. Post a link to Craft and Tailored YouTube channel for everyone. And that's something else. Everyone who's in the chat, who's watching the show, I recommend you have a look at Cam's channel because it's so different. This is how we all really connected back in the day. Not only do we get to see these incredible examples in hand, but we also get a better understanding of the history. I mean, I loved listening to that AP video you did. What's that? That aventurine, is that the name of the stone?
It is, yeah. It's incredible.
And now your sound is perfect again. Oh, tell you what, talk about inconsistency. I love it. I love it. That's what we do. It makes such a different experience seeing these watches in hand, and I also like the fact that it's not, talked up. I find you to be a very humble guy, which is something pretty special in this space. The watches that you deal with are pretty collectible, and to say that you can just talk about it as you can talk about you just looked at a swatch the other day. You talk about a swatch next to something like a Newman Daytona and manage to ride the same line when it comes to discussing them. I like the fact that you treat them almost equally in the way that you view them. It's very important. Lots of
I think at the end of the day, I'm a watch guy. I like watches holistically, not just Grail watches. I think we've had a lot of what most people would consider Grail watches in our collection, but I like watches in general. Just as a lot of us do, and it doesn't have to be a Newman or a Daytona or something. It can be
these,
a swatch. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I just love it. I mean, the variety was so good. I wanted this to be like a jumble of images because we jump all over the show from Rolexes to Omegas. Again, we've only probably looked at like 50 of them. There's another Speedmaster. This is quite good. I like the idea of looking at modern versus vintage. And again, going back to what we spoke about in the beginning, the whole debate about modern is not going to change. And I don't know if Showcase Watches is still in the chat, but there was talk in a live show I think I watched with a couple of guys. I can't remember the channel link. It's a bit of an underground channel live stream, but they were talking about how they would love to see aluminium reintroduced again on Rolex pieces. And I find it funny that from an engineering side, we talk about ceramic as this much more superior material, and a brand like Rolex would probably never go back to that. It's a nice sentiment, but it wouldn't happen, right?
I don't think that they would, and it's like Porsche going back to the air-cooled motor. I don't think that they're going to do that either. They are a company that revolves around technical advancements of materials and design, and so.
That always has been their mantra. That's something I think is very important to highlight as well. They've always been about durability and going the next level, the next step, and all the rest.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Sorry, again, there's some great chats. Megan saying Cam's enthusiastic about 2K as he is 200K. I think that separates men from the boys in this field, I believe, at least. Because, again, the whole there's definitely an area where the snobs jump in. I mean, Grail watches, it's a perfect example. Some people really love pieces that are, one-ofs with all the trimmings, but then others, speaking about vintage, it's another ballpark, and that's what I wanted to try and bring across with this discussion. I don't know how effective it was, but I just like perfection. Michael R. says, brilliant point. That's such a good statement, right? Cam, if you're there, I don't know.
Yep, so here. I think it's a great statement. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's almost, we think about everything in life. Actually, we can talk about that briefly. The digital age that we're living in with technology, as we're dealing with it right now, the rubbish with signals and connections and this consumer throwaway culture. I find it so great when we can look back at the simplicity of timekeeping and what made these things durable back in the day. Maybe they're not as durable nowadays when we look at them in general, but it's fascinating to see. I just love, actually, we can let's go into this discussion. I'd like your feedback on this. Let's keep pulling pieces up. Mark II is one of my favorites. I love this racing dial, by the way. I love the fact, when we were talking about Wabi Sabi, as Formula says, we were talking about watch design over the ages. And I made a stream a while ago about how 1950s watch design influenced the big picture. And we saw just how these brands became competitive again. They weren't allies, should we say, because the war had just ended, and so everyone had to partner up. with their creative. They didn't have to anymore. They broke up their partnerships in many areas, and I find it fascinating that competition drove the development in all these areas. Looking at Submariners and the Speedmaster and the Daytonas, and moving further into other areas like the 50 Fathoms. Everyone was trying to get onto the bandwagon and push their product in a different area. And yeah, do you want to add anything else on that? I find that's one thing I find about the whole vintage area. You get to appreciate the wabi-sabi, the process, the background to these pieces when they were first established, when everyone was trying to outdo the next person. Nowadays, creatively, companies are quite dried up, should we say. They're just banking on inspirations from 50 plus years ago at this point. I love it.
I would agree. Yeah. And that's where I think, I also have a passion for some of the independent watchmakers, because they're, really pushing the design. I mean, one of my favorite, smaller brands is like, even Nomos, for example. Like their Bauhaus edition is just incredible. I love watches like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then reaching deeper into, it's one thing. Many people despise Nomos for being this. Oh, I think it's incredible for a brand that's been around since like 95. 73 Math says, "Here we go, great flow, great flow." That's a good start. So we are actually getting somewhere now. I think. Who knows? I think this is a repeat of a photograph that I had earlier. Look at this dial. Nomos as a brand has done such a good job in their small time of being on this. They're fully in house, and they dig deep into an identity that was, very much lost, I would say. The Bauhaus history, when Germany became Naziized, what's the best word? Nazi occupation. Bauhaus movement was pushed aside, and for someone to go back and dig into those roots, it's incredible. Some brands, you're right, saying some brands are really capable of going to the next level with the way they dig into inspirations, and others just enjoy resting on their laurels, if that's the best way to describe.
I think sometimes it's just so good. It's like, how do you redo it? You almost can't. This is a stone dial that I was talking about.
Tiger's Eye, my favorite stone.
They're really cool. And, I think the thing that's unique about the stone dials, we've done a couple of videos on these, is that each stone is different. You literally have your own piece unique within the stone. So I really like that idea. I think that creates exclusivity, that's true exclusivity.
And what I love is just, I think the colors are so complementary. Reminds me of root beer GMTs, which we're probably going to see in a second. Tiger's Eye as a stone. Growing up in Africa, I used to collect huge ones because they were just everywhere. And it's the most incredible. And seeing it on a gold top Les Paul, I mean, what's this, a 63? It's a 63, I think you said.
It's a 62 or 63, yeah.
Oh, man. I mean, this is one way to tell its age. Ooh, if we had to lift this up, we'd probably be able to see some marking underneath, and you can see the switch is all aged. I love it. I mean, we could just sit and chat about these pieces for hours on end. Yeah, we've tried.
We do. We do, you and I,
as it is. This is really the laugh, is that we've basically, I see a super chat. Sorry guys if I haven't reached out. Did I miss it? Oh, that was an old one from MCD. What I find funny is that this talk is very much how we would generally talk over a Skype call. It's just everyone is seeing what we are talking about normally, with a bit of a background presentation,
Captain Willard, Seiko 6105-8110. We just did a really cool article about the history of the 6105-8110. And you did a video that talked about these as being a watch that was issued, or not issued, but available to soldiers in the Vietnam War.
Watches of Vietnam. And it was virtually on par with Rolex with regards to price back in the day, which I find is incredible. And what it is, what I love so much about the aesthetics of this piece is it's Seiko's first step forward into their own unique area of expertise in the design. I find it one of the most fascinating watches. It's the royal oak of AP's modern line, we could say. It pushed the samurai, it pushed the full development of the SKX, all of them, and the 62 MAS. I think we have a few. It's a ripoff of a Blancpain Bathyscaphe from the same time period. Should we say rip-off? I don't know. Inspired by, we could say. But this one pushed the boundaries to the next level.
The other cool thing too, I think, about this, most people, are like, oh, it's just a Seiko, et cetera, et cetera. But, not a lot of people realize that Seiko made their own hardlex crystals. They made
Yeah.
their own cases. They made their own movements. All that's in-house, which is incredible. So, like, it's not just a Seiko. It's a serious watch. It's a serious watch that has a lot of merit behind it from a horological perspective.
Creatively, and just the offset crown, all these little things. I love it. It's just such a watch of its time. And then we just keep on moving. I mean, this is a lot of fun, just running through these pieces and chatting. Many are saying thanks for the show. We're cooking with gas now, Rajiv says. Thank you, Rajiv. So I think we've actually found our
really
pace.
Cool. So that's a Breitling Cosmonaut. So similar to the 806, but it's instead of it being a 12-hour scale,
24-hour.
It's 24. Yeah.
Love it. That's so unique. I mean, you look at it, see 2, 4, 8, 10, and then transitions to 14, 16. I don't even know how you would read that. It looks so bizarre as a dial. The hands work the same way.
They work the same way. They're just on a different, basically, it's different mechanism essentially, because it's a 24-hour scale versus 12.
Oh, I love it. I'm just trying to read the chat as well. I don't know if you can see the chat, Cam, while we're at it. Oh,
yep, I can.
I'm infatuated. I'm looking at this on a 5K screen. And again, for all of you in the chat, you're probably not seeing it in the most high res, but these watches, the way these photos are taken, I shouldn't big up the photography, but I have to say it's just on another level. What I think I mentioned in the beginning of the show is that there's a mood to everything that you seem to do with your presentations, with photographs, with furniture, with everything. I always find
I think it kind of changes the way that I feel about myself. It's like one thing that's kind of funny is like my desk in the office is something that I always kind of change and curate, and it kind of just inspires me differently. And I think the same thing with our photos. We try to tell a story instead of just like wrist shot.
It's very important. I mean, in the design space too, it's all about context. Context is what. And visual narrative, holy smokes. I mean, that we can talk about that for ages and ages. But in the design space, you want to make it, I mean, geez, look at these things. You want to make it as understandable without any words at all. You want the picture to do the talking instead of descriptions. And so it is. Everyone's saying great photography. I mean, I should have these Pixar watch porn, as Jimmy says. I know. I mean, it's just nuts. And I love the contrasting colors. I don't know how you do it. You do have a professional who's working with you at the moment, right?
We do, yeah. So we have a full-time photographer, and then we have a videographer as well, and a full-time editor who helps kind of take these images and ultimately make sure that they're the lighting is proper and stuff like that. Most of the editing happens on the videos and stuff like that, color balancing and stuff like that.
Oh, tell you, I'm a one-man band, and I can really appreciate the effort it takes to get all of this. I mean, this is probably the only modern watch that we have on the show.
That's the Black Bay 58. Yeah.
And I mean, everyone knows that I've debated the whole Blue Bay, the latest watch that came out recently, and that I call it controversy, but it's not. I think this is a far more interesting watch in the Black Bay line.
One of the reasons why I like it too is it reminds me of a Big Crown, and I think that there's a lot of details in this watch that you don't see in the Blue Bay. Mainly, if you really look at the watch, the markers are rose gold, the hands are rose gold. It has kind of a matte gilt type dial. You have the red triangle. It's almost like a patinaed gilt Big Crown sub, but even cooler because you have the snowflake hands, which is awesome.
You like the snowflake hands? That's interesting, because I find it so jarring. I really find it jarring on this piece. That's just me. I think a snowflake dial deserves snowflake hands. Otherwise, the squares and circles, just my design brain says, what are you thinking, man?
Well, yeah, it's not angular enough, right? Because the snowflake, it plays against the kind of that geometric shape of like the snowflake hand, and the diamond in the sweep seconds hand, which I totally agree with. I also like that, we had one of the watches on earlier. It was a 9401/0, which was called like the Tudor Hybrid. which was a Royal Canadian Navy issued watch that ultimately inspired the Black Bay.
Yeah, we had it on earlier. We had it very briefly, I think, and it's disappeared sadly. But
I don't want to go back to that because that's when I think we started to lose our audio.
it's got a bad rap, I think, behind it for sure. It's funny, eh? The sound is amazing now, though. I don't know why or how. Maybe it's because I'm sharing the full screen. I don't know. But here we go. I mean, here's one of the very expensive pieces in this category. I would say the ones that collectors are going after. Let's talk about this briefly. I mean, we've been going for now 2 hours 15. Now it's starting to settle down, I think, which is great. I think I'm going to put some timestamps in the video once it's all finished, where we can all, listen to this a bit slower. But I want to know your thoughts on the Daytona market, because you're primarily known as a Daytona guy at this point. I'd like to know more about what do you think, whether it's worth. I guess it's difficult to justify because you definitely need to. These watches are ones that you sell, but do you think it's worth all the praise and attention that this watch gets?
I mean, for me, it's a watch that I really love. It's a watch that I've chased around the world. I love the association with Paul and him wearing it. I love the story behind that. Everything from the Art Deco to when you loop a watch like this and you really dive into just
That's good.
The texture, it's really something else. And I think for me, that's what makes these watches special. And that's why, part of the reason why I think I'm an expert in that field, or known as an expert, is because I just obsess over the details and I really dive into them. And, it's something that it haunts me. I think about it. And so I think they are really up to the hype. If you really get into these watches and you really look at them and loop them, there's just details that are amazing, that really differentiate it.
Very charming, yeah. And I mean, it was, I just love the background that everyone loves Paul, Clint says. I just love the fact that back then, these weren't made to be anything but functional instruments, and no one wanted them. And there is this theory, I don't know if you've heard the theory, but Joanne Woodward went into the store, and I'm pretty sure the salespeople pushed this watch on her. There wasn't a watch that caught her attention so much. But then, you go into a store and you say, hey, I need a watch for my husband. And what does he do? Oh, he races cars. And then all of a sudden, light bulb. Let's get to have this watch that we can't sell. I think it's a pretty funny story how it all, developed. There's so many other pieces. I've got to keep flicking through. But yeah, if you want to carry on with that.
Yeah. I think it's Forbin Colossus asked, is it true that Paul Newman gave this watch to her daughter's boyfriend
to pound nails whilst building a treehouse? I think so. Yes. Keeping time is one thing, but you really need a steel watch for the finer point. In the end, you use the crown. By the way, this is an unknown secret, that when you want to really get a fine point when you're hammering nails, use something like a crown on a watch. I'm BSing everyone. Sorry, it's just me at this time of the evening. But as it is, it's just nonstop. There's so much variety here. And again, for all of you, okay, this is my Grail. Again, talking about Grails, and that we sort of deviated away from the subject a bit, but I guess we're talking about various areas.
Really cool. This is another Genta design watch, the pole router. Gerald Genta, who also designed the 5402 and the Nautilus, or the AP Royal Oak, and the Patek Philippe Nautilus. He designed the pole router, which is incredible.
So this one's exceptional because you generally don't see the pole router with a diving bezel. This is just so, reminds me of the Milgaus's from the 50s. What was that reference? The 6542 or something?
6542, you have like the 10. There's a few Milgaus's for sure. What's interesting about this too is if you look at the bezel, it's actually reversed. So you have 10 and 50.
I tell you, the practicality of a countdown bezel, people just don't know unless they've had one. I love it. I mean, my Seamaster's got one, and it's so practical. It's another added feature. You have to do a bit of maths to work out a couple of things if you're using it conventionally, but otherwise, it's a lot of fun. If you know how long your cook is going to take in the oven, it makes life a little bit easier. Yeah, and
This is an incredible watch. So that's a Tiffany
ooh, I
16750.
didn't see that. I didn't see that. Tiffany dial.
Yep.
And one thing that just caught my attention, I think, was the sharpness of the case and crown guards. Everything just looks so mint. Also,
Yeah.
love the numerals. There's something
Yep.
special about that's the little. It's all these quirks when we talk about these pieces. The little quirks that you don't see on modern stuff. And you have to ask: does Rolex deem it inferior? Does Rolex not want to? I find Rolex as a brand fascinating that they that they don't they tend to not pay tribute to their past as much. They like to build on and move forward.
Right.
But you see so many other brands at the moment that are most definitely trying to reach back. I mean, Vacheron. This is quite a clear. I mean,
Totally.
we see patrimonies that are very similar to this even today, and this is a piece from this is a piece from the '60s, roughly. You know, I can't believe how good the audio is again. What happened?
Don't talk about it. We're gonna we're
Gonna
gonna scare it away.
touch wood. Okay, got to keep going. Timing for pizza, everyone says, yeah, I mean, right. And Megan's saying, very nice, Tiffany. Oh, I'm quite, I don't know if you know this, Cam. When I met you, I was wearing a Smith's Everest. There was question about talking about homage watches, pieces designed
Oh yeah,
around.
I remember it. I think it's a great watch. And the thing that's cool about that is not many people associate, the Smiths brand with Everest, and
It's a
Rolex
nice
kind of
blend.
just
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
Rolex kind of got all the limelight, for that, and Smiths, was up there too, and it formed just as well, in some cases maybe even better,
Yeah,
So it's kind of funny learning about how different marketing and different events can shape the way a brand is perceived by the general public, as opposed to, you know, something that was otherwise not. So it's
yeah.
interesting how that kind of can change.
I can tell you that the Rolex brand, as a marketing machine, they do a good job. I'm actually making I've made a video all about the Explorer 1 and 2 and all the development there, and speak about which is better, addressing that point and how this Explorer line has evolved over time. It's a great marketing background. I think they definitely capitalized on that exploit and that history, and it's great. There was good talk about Rolex as a brand and how it's people don't necessarily appreciate it for the watchmaking, but they appreciate it as a brand for the reason of its marketing and as a powerhouse. Most watch groups wish they were Rolex in this field, which is also pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah. But everything else there's talk about don't like Mercedes hand. Again, if you'd like to get me in the chat, tag me. Michael, thank you. Getting drunk, can't leave watches. Yeah, I know. And looking at this, so can you give me the context? I feel like this is a 1968-ish, probably, Seamaster 300, roughly.
Yeah, so this is actually the earlier variant. So one of the things that you'll notice here is that the watch doesn't have what we would call like the gladiator hand. So that the pencil hands were found in the earlier Seamaster 300s.
Yeah.
This one I believe is probably like a 67, 68. The reference is 165.024, and I believe that one is actually probably from 67. But in any case, yeah, the earlier variants like 66, 67s, they can, it's actually a bit of a transitional year for the gladiator hand, which was kind of similar to what you would see like on like a mill sub.
Yeah. It's the same kind of time period, right? The same
It
sort
is,
of,
yeah.
this is precursor to the mill sub that came in afterwards, right?
Yeah, matter of fact, the British Royal Navy actually used Omega before they used Rolex. So yeah, I mean the what they call the Mill Master is actually the precursor to the Mill Sub.
Never heard of Mill Master before. That's nice. I like that name. But yeah,
yeah.
as it is, there's so many pieces. I've never seen this. A Techno Skydiver. This is another thing. We've been chatting about Newmans and the rest, but you also, I mean, when we met each other, you had a little Zodiac Seawolf GMT with a Bakelite bezel.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love the idea that you can just pick up whatever. We love all things pertaining to this field, this area. And so
that watch actually stayed in my personal collection. I actually gifted that watch to my cousin Tyler, who
Awesome.
works with me. So he has a bit of an affinity for Zodiac watches, and so that one was just so cool and had like a nice little vibe in patina. It ended up staying in the collection.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, an original Bakelite bezel from back then, and it's still in great nick. And I mean, it's as it is. We just keep going. There's lots of stuff going on in the chat about. I mean, I see Flippin' Zippo's joined us. That's great. Thomas Burnett saying, "What's your favorite vintage non-Rolex?" Oof, how's that for a question, Cam?
That's a great question. I really like Omega Speedmasters. Oh,
Mm.
I mean, I love them. I love the manual wound movement. I love the history behind them.
Yeah.
I think it's a watch that on the vintage side, is accessible, all things considered. You can get pretty crazy with an Omega Speedmaster, but like a good 70s era Speedmaster on a bracelet, for me, like that's the jam. I love it.
And I'm sure you know the story about the Rodania geometer and how the dial design is very much linked to that watch instead. And it's all due to these watches being built out of parts bins back in the day, which I think is pretty funny, and that's almost like because Rodania went out of business and Omega didn't, they pretty much kept the rights to all the designs. And once it went to space and once it really got that name out there, the story, game changer, story over. Yeah. And Flippin' Zippo, again, thank you for joining us. We've had a wild time, to say the least. First time I'm having a guest on the show. And so the audio decides to conk out about 100 minutes in, as is normally the case, And I should also mention, we've just gone over 2 hours, that YouTube's processing and encoding does all sorts of weird things. Odds are you won't see the first hour of the show until like Monday or Tuesday, because I don't know what they're doing. They're not focusing on live shows anymore. I don't know. There's some weird technique because they're low on staff at the moment. I really want to talk about this though, because this is a cool story. This comes from one owner, I remember.
Yep.
You flew out to meet him and it's his dad's watch or something. I'd love you to tell us that story quickly, because this is a pre Daytona. This is not the James Bond Daytona. It's much before that. Talking late 50s roundabout, right?
Yeah, this is specifically from 1959. The reference is 6234, so it's a pre-Daytona. With the introduction of the Daytona line, you see the tachometer on the outside of the dial, and that's comprised of a bezel, so steel or the Bakelite bezel.
Yeah.
But this was interesting because this 6234 retains like all the original box and the papers and the cigarette cards and like all that stuff that came with the watch. And it was a watch that was actually gifted to the original owner by his wife. And it was for, I think, their first wedding anniversary or something like that. It was an anniversary gift.
Yeah.
And so, in any case, the original owner, who was then, a grandfather, gifted the watch to, his grandson, who just, again, kind of just didn't connect the watch and wanted to end up selling it. And I think we even have like the original sales receipts and
I mean, you made a video all about this and discussed it at length, and it's incredible. I mean, you firstly, you just don't see these watches on display, which I find quite. I mean, would this be auction? This would be auction house worthy, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, and that's something that's funny too, because like sometimes I come across this stuff and I'm like, do we put this in auction, or do we sell it ourselves? Like, what do we do? So it's kind of interesting being in that position. And sometimes we work with the auction house. It just kind of depends on the piece.
And I just love it. I mean, the blue highlights, the blue hands, it's just reminiscent of 40s era pieces, and that was, anti-corrosion. I love that story. There's just so much. I mean, I want to know more about this, because this feels like the Dirty Dozen for the American military back in the day. I feel like this is what they used in the military back then. It wasn't a Benrus, right? Hamilton. I don't know what the name is.
Oh no. This is not a Benrus. But wait, were you talking about? Hold on, I'm catching up with you.
The stream's a bit slow.
The stream is a little bit slow. Yeah.
So we're looking at this. It's like a 24-hour dial. Maybe refresh the stream. That might help you. I don't know.
Yeah, let me refresh it. Hold on one
Okay.
second.
Okay. So Second World War, Michael says, yeah. And Rob Ward says how to deal with the stretch in vintage bracelets when considering to buy them. It's a good point. I mean, that's actually, I'm going to ask Cam if he's still here with us.
Yeah, I'm still here. So dealing with stretch, some bracelets, they just stretch more so than others.
Yeah.
You know,
Jump back.
some bracelets can be restored and repaired.
Yeah.
So there's that option. If it's a gold bracelet, sometimes there's typically more stretch with gold because gold is a soft, metal. And so, sometimes the stretch will be there. Sometimes, the stretch is actually comfortable. Sometimes the stretch, I think, facilitates better wear and use. But, there are, a couple of guys out there that do restore bracelets and, can do that. But I think it's, again, kind of finding that balance.
Between something that's actually capable of being restored and something that is no possibility. I mean, talking about gold, especially as a metal, it's so volatile in this area, right?
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, I need to jump onto this though, because people are asking in the chats about Elgin. I'm thinking it's Elgin or.
Okay. So it's an A17. Yeah.
A17.
So that's actually a Waltham.
Okay.
Yeah, the cool thing about that watch is that these watches were commonly gifted to, or not gifted, rather they were issued to F-86 Sabre pilots, and they were in production from 1950 to 1956. So this is Korean War era.
Okay. And what I find amazing is that in the 40s they had very similar dials to these. So you see how it develops over time. I love comparing the US inspirations next to the British inspiration. Yeah. And BDev says looks like a hand heart bezel. It does. It really does.
Yeah, and the other thing that's kind of interesting about this is there was a couple of different Wathams that had kind of this like inner timing kind of like tooth, so to speak, which would be kind of like a marker that you could rotate the outer bezel to kind of like have as a point of reference, which is super cool.
I mean, this is great. This is great. Having the 60-minute marks, you could most definitely use it as a timer, countdown timer.
Yeah, you could for sure. I love the patina in this watch. Like it's super cool. I mean, it's just like
it's definitely seen life. It looks like it's been in someone's ear.
Yeah.
And this is all radium. This is all radium degradation.
It's all radium.
The worst kind. I love it. And then got to carry on moving through. There's still so much. This is also another modern IWC. We saw the Mark 12 earlier, but this is the modern take of it.
Yep.
And gotta love Flieger's. I don't know how many watches we still have in the list, in the lineup. Yeah, but normally 3 hours is a good cap for us to run these shows, because generally that's when the show ends. But it's just the photography, man. I can't get over it. Every single shot is different, a different setting. It must be so painstaking, this work, right?
It is. It's a labor of love for sure, and I just feel responsible for putting all this stuff together with these watches, because I just feel like these watches deserve it. And so setting up a shot definitely takes time, and getting the lighting right to kind of highlight and accent things is something that we definitely pay attention to. We're very much into the details, and
I can't believe it. I mean, I love the juxtaposition of having it on a Mac. You're dealing with an old school chronograph, Monte Carlo from the 70s, and then you've got a Mac laptop next to it. It's quite a nice, looking at industrial. These two pieces definitely are industrial in the way they position themselves, right? It's just nuts. I mean, I could just be spending hours looking through all these pieces. As it is, the nice thing is this is great. We seem to have mellowed out a lot since the beginning of the show. The energy has lingered down. I mean, Cam, must be a new thing for you, running a 2-hour plus show.
I like it. It's fun.
Normally these shows go on for like 3, and I think most in the chat realize that this is the usual approach. But I think it's just hilarious. What a day! What a strange way of doing a live show. Oof! Got to have a good look at this.
Rob had a good question. Bracelet condition wouldn't put me off in buying. I think to answer that, it kind of just depends. If the bracelet is just totally gone, and the watch itself is in really good condition, then it might be a watch that I would look at purchasing, because I almost look at the bracelet sometimes as like a consumable item within the watch, right? It's like a pair of brake pads within a car. Things wear out, right? And a bracelet is the easiest thing to find as a replacement. So I wouldn't. I think I kind of look at everything holistically, but in some cases, a bracelet would be something that is either repairable or something that you could replace and find a better bracelet. Also, depending on metals and things like that. So just to loop back on that.
Talking about Grail again, getting back into the Grail field. I mean, a 1675 at this point is a watch that I think most would aspire to own in the Rolex. It's funny how popular the GMT has become in the last year, should we say? I think it's pretty incredible just because of Rolex. I can tell you that the new release of the Pepsi on the Jubilee has suddenly got everyone going nuts for this area. Now, if you can't get the ceramic, this is quite a nice step in a different direction, right?
Yeah.
I think it's so, and the condition again. The first 1675 I held was that famous little gem of yours. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. And then we get to the big guns. So you're also quite the purveyor of mil-spec watches, and how many 5513s, 17s, double references have you handled? Would you say, or been through?
I've been through a good number of them. They're actually very rare watches. I mean, watches that were produced at this level for military consumption, are very far and few between, and there's just not a lot of them. In my line of work, obviously, I get to see in many cases the best of the best, and also sometimes the worst of the worst.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
But I've been through a good number of them. This was a really prime example. One of the nicest 5513 mil subs that I've ever handled and that we've ever had in our extended collection. I just liked the patina of the watch. The case condition was really nice still.
Yeah.
And these watches were used for military applications. So in some cases, they do show dings and dents.
Absolutely destroyed. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, who's that collector? He was based in the UK and now he lives in New York. He works.
That's Graham Fowler.
Fowler. He seems to be how many do you know him? Have you met him before?
Yeah, I have. Graham is a great guy.
How many does he still have? Because I think the interview that he had last time was he had like 10 of these at least.
Yeah. And he had a bunch of mill masters, and Graham has had, he has an incredible collection of mill subs and military divers.
Marine nationals, and I love it. There's such a great background.
These watches at one time used to be very affordable. I just had an Instagram live with Magnus Walker, who's a friend of mine here in LA, who's deeply involved in the Porsche community, and kind of the same thing with his Porsches as it is with my watches. Like, there was a time where these things were kind of accessible, affordable, and now it's like if you want an early long hood 911. 60s or early 70s era 911, it's $100,000 entry price point. Whereas like a mil sub, just a few years ago wasn't $100,000. They were accessible. I'm not saying that they were cheap, but they were accessible.
It's hilarious, and I mean we could just keep. I think I've got a few more. Here's another shot. That's great. As it is, I mean the condition is sublime for what it is. There was a question by James Con. He always gives us good questions. How do vintage and semi-vintage GMTs run? I've got a 2005 16713 that runs great, but wondering if there is an outlier. Basically, do older GMTs subs run okay? And I've found this to be a common complaint amongst people. I don't know if it's just who I've been listening to in the past, but they talk about how Rolexes generally tend to run slow as they get older. Is that a common complaint? I'm very keen to know.
Yes and no. We have two watchmakers on our bench that service our watches, and watches like old cars, they need love. I think the thing that's kind of interesting is today we're using synthetic lubricants and that kind of stuff that yield a longevity in the watch's ability to keep time. But just like a car. The watches will need a service and kind of need to be maintained over their life. And I think some people forget about that.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is with some vintage watches, like sometimes they're finicky. They kind of, in a weird way, have a personality of their own. And I think that, it's kind of like cars. Like sometimes with a vintage 911, it's like, you have to warm it up a little bit and kind of like, there's a personality to it. Some 911s don't like, cold. Some of them do better in the heat. Same thing with watches, and under different circumstances, obviously. But
and one thing that I find quite perplexing is when you get vintage watches. I love this Air King, by the way. That bezel just sells it to me. It looks so like a watch of the 50s, I was going to say, I find it funny how brands like Rolex can replace certain components, certain gears with replacements. And that completely affects the timekeeping. The watch just loses its ability. The metal has worn down over time, and now all of a sudden introducing a new component just throws the accuracy out of whack. I find it crazy. This field, again, talking about vintage watches, it can be such a minefield, right?
100%. Yeah. And that's, ultimately where we bridge the gap between somebody that is just, looking at, acquiring something, and then having us like really go into the details and using a breadth of, experience and perspective to go, okay, that loom looks right, or the movement is fine, or the bridge that's the original finishing on the bridge, or,
there was a great question, by the way. Foreman
about
how does Cam avoid reflections in his photos? That's a good point.
I just saw that. Yeah. Great. I am a photographer at heart. I like shooting on analog film, and our photographer is also very talented. It's diffusers. A lot. One of the things that's interesting is we try not to do any work in post. If we can capture the shot and not, have to do a lot of work in post, that's kind of the goal. And what we found is that setting up a shot and taking the time to set up the shot will alleviate a lot of time in post, like removing things like little reflections or balancing color. So, there's a couple of good tips and tricks. I actually thought about maybe doing a video with our photographer just to kind of go through how he's shooting stuff.
Just a 101 about how to arrange the lighting. And I mean, that's good. That would make some big interest, because I know a lot of us in the Instagram space, especially, all the rest, you just know that everyone tries to achieve the perfect shot, but it's not. I mean, you have to stand at awkward angles. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes that people just don't see, right?
Totally. Yeah. And the fun thing is, like, in our office here in LA, we have a library in which we, kind of have our quote unquote watch hangs, right? And we use a lot of the things from my collection in our photos. So, my photographer, Nick, will pull like different little artifacts down, and I like that a lot. That's another thing that I'm just kind of obsessive over, is just collecting little artifacts and things like that. But we also, it's fun because I like including those in the photos to kind of share them, with everybody else. And so.
This is a great question. Oh, great point from Rob, saying one thing that's helpful is to remember to appreciate the watches you have. Say thanks, being thankful for having the watch that you own and for everything you put into it. And that's important, right? So that's like the underlying, I think that's the way we could basically close off the show, essentially, when you're talking about with regards to, being so inspired to buy these crazy pieces that most of us probably won't attain in our lives. But at the same time, you should appreciate the little things. I mean, life is precious, time is precious. It doesn't
totally,
the watch itself doesn't need to represent your hopes and wants and dreams. In the end of the day, it doesn't have to be. I mean, this is a good example. We're talking about Royal Oaks. I don't think we've looked at a few earlier. It's just been, this show's been jam packed with stuff, which I find it's pretty great. It's been a good time just looking at the level of variety. I think there's still so much more. I love this. This is like you're tripping on acid having a look at this, right?
What's crazy is, I actually really like the two-tone Royal Oak 5402s, and they're a watch that is somewhat attainable as well right now. I mean, considering that a steel 5402, depending on the series, goes for a lot, but the two-tone 5402s are very accessible for the same exact watch. So, yeah,
it's stunning. And the way AP does rose gold is different to how other brands do it. I mean, you got this. It's very copper. They include more copper into their color, right? Am I right in saying that, or is that just
Yeah,
that's
the
age? Would
gold
you
will
say
actually oxidize over
oxidized? Yeah.
time, and it'll take like a rosy patina, as we call it.
Mm.
But the gold will oxidize and actually take on kind of an interesting color profile, as it ages,
Yeah.
which is really cool. I like the color of old gold, as they say.
Yeah. And I mean, it's another thing, talking about vintage and the uniqueness and the profile. But as it is, I don't know how many more watches are on display. I think we've gotten through at least 2/3 of the pieces. I didn't know how we were going to present this show, but I don't know what the chat's saying. Hunting and Odomar's Piguet and as it is, Doxer subs. I mean, we could just be doing this for ages and ages, but I definitely don't want to wear you out, Cam. We're almost about to hit the 3-hour mark, which is it's pretty decent, right?
Yeah, this has been great. That's really cool. I love that Doxa, another Newman. That's a
Yeah.
6241.
Yeah.
Actually, that is go a little closer. Let's take a look
Yeah.
at that. That's a 6241. Yeah,
Oh,
thought
it's
it was
so
a
sharp.
6264 for a second, but it's a 6241 Newman.
And I find the whole collector space quite an interesting place. Just how who do you think perpetuated? Sorry, that probably like spiked the mic again. I've never used this mic before, so it's probably very awkward. This collector space, who do you think is the real perpetrator that's pushed the vintage market the way it has? Would we say Hodinkee is the underlying brand, the name that's pushed these forward?
I would think so. Yeah, again, I know that we had some like funny comments about Ben and Houdinki
Yeah,
and all that
yeah,
stuff, and
yeah.
and I'm not afraid to talk about that stuff. And
Oh no.
with the recently, like the talk of like the watch market, I think has been this clock that they put out, and I'm an independent guy.
Oh
I
geez.
look at I take things as they are.
Yeah,
I didn't really understand the clock and that kind of stuff, but I think Houdini did start a lot of that, and I think that was the initial inspiration and kind of the idea behind Houdinki. When Ben created Houdinki, I don't know what 10 something years ago.
yeah,
There really wasn't a vintage watch blog or a watch blog out there that was talking about horology and really diving into the details. I think unfortunately now, like most things that there's other things at play that are driving the content.
yeah. It's sad. We
And
have chatted about it on the phone and just how the business model has changed so drastically. Hey, there's the passion seems to have dried up ever so slightly, we could say.
yeah, and I think there's outside factors that contribute to that. But
Hmm.
I would say, Houdinki's, there's that. I think Instagram and social media altogether has allowed people, to connect. And I mean, also for you and I mean, that's kind
Yeah,
of how we connected
exactly.
was
Exactly.
through social media, which is awesome. And that's the funny thing, again, I love technology. I really am. I leverage technology to the max. And part of the thing that I love about that is the ability to connect with people over a common subject, which I think
Hmm.
is great. So,
Yeah, I love it. I must say. I mean, who has the capability of seeing watches like these? This is what I wanted to try and bring forward to everyone in the chat, everyone who's been watching. Uh, the ability to see watches like these on display that are pretty rare nowadays. I mean, you barely find these kinds of aqualungs in this kind of condition. Talking about that story and that development, 50s inspiration, and again, context. I don't know. We could chat about this for months and months. Novados. We got another aqualung, and so it is. I mean, the show is going to be centered around me just slide showing these pieces.
this is a great watch
Yeah.
too. I mean,
Pogue.
this is the Pogue. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
this one is just super cool. And again, a watch that has like a lot of color. It's interesting. Colonel Pogue wore one up to space. I
Yeah.
mean, just super cool history, and also a watch that is pretty affordable. Like going
Yeah.
back to the Grail thing, like finding a good watch like this could be a Grail. I mean, it's a Grail for me for sure. It's like every time I get one of these, somebody wants to buy it, and
Yeah.
it's like hard because
We chatted about it as well, talking about that the whole field of dealing and what happens when people are just wanting stuff off your wrist, and it must be so difficult when you're having all of these things on offer and generally everything is for sale, but then at the same time parting with it. I love this. I mean, Tudor should really look at their quality control because this is just abysmal, right?
Oh, it's insane. We call that like an Acme dial or a Wardy
Acme dial.
dial. It was it was a flaw lacquer that, you know, I would say probably seawater or something in there.
No. We've got a bit of a sound glitch again.
Oh
This is
no.
this is getting, I tell you, this is just, it's nuts. But yeah, to acne dial, I like that. I didn't think of that as a name. That's pretty hilarious. But the condition, the actually seeing the level of, I mean, it's just, this looks like fudge, you know. How often do we see this kind of finishing inside here? Are you back, Cam? I think he's gone again.
Yeah, so here.
Okay, it's still glitching away. Again, I mean, we almost run. I think we should actually call it a show, because we have been going for now, like, what, almost 3 hours at this point. I'm pretty sure you're exhausted.
Oh, I'm good. This is what I do. I like talking watches. So
yeah, man. I'm quite frustrated that the tech just didn't line up, but that's, you know, it's not down to us at the end of the day. It's just what happens. Oh dear.
Yeah, there's some good comments. It's like every time I see a Pogue on Chrono 24 in good shape, it flies. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, really.
it's really cool.
And there's great chats going on. Again, I've missed you all in the chats as always. I'm trying to like keep the show presentable and all, but it's difficult at times. But I love something about the root beer. I think Thomas Burnett will also say that this is one of the watches that he would love to get his hands on. He's one of the most fellow viewers on this channel and the watch channels in general. And I gotta love the root beer. How many of these do you think have come in and out of your door, would you say?
A good number of them, you know, and again, I think it's a watch that's definitely accessible to the collector community. You know, it's something that's a bit of a sleeper, especially with that dial. Like, I love that dial. They can do that like a tiger eye dial almost. Kind of resembles a tiger eye stone, but really, really presentable, cool dial.
Yeah, it's great. Again, your audio is a little bit choppy, but I think we can work with it. I think we can deal. And I know this is a strat that you have with this tortoise shell from like the 60s, I would imagine, a 60s variant.
Yeah, it's 62.
Oh, I love it. And I mean, we could just, again, I've got so many of these photos in stock. So as it is, we're just flicking through all of these. It's just exceptional. And the resolution, you get to enjoy all the little dings and scrapes.
Nice little waffle dial. Yeah, it's great Omega.
And again, you have this like eclectic state of everything having some kind of wear and mood and age to it. I do find that quite fascinating, because me in the design world, it's a little bit different. You know, industrial design is all about clean. I don't think we've even seen an icopod yet. You know, Newson's icopod, wherever it is. Again, there's just hundreds of photos. But
another snowflake. Yeah, great snowflake.
Yeah. And as it is, this was the cover photo originally. This looks like an Israeli dial. Can you please clarify?
It's actually Hebrew. Yeah. So out of all of the languages that Rolex produced, this is the most rare
stunning
of all the languages. Yeah. Very cool watch.
It is stunning. And I hope everyone who's in the chat is keeping up with what's going on here. I don't know. The rate of the show has slowed down quite a bit. We're not talking as much anymore. I think we've covered the majority. This is generally what happens. The whole, you can plan as much as you want around a subject like Grail Watches or whatever else, but then it eventually, just after an hour, it just divulges into whatever, and we just talk about whatever's on offer. So yeah, it's been a good time though. I've enjoyed it. I mean, I gotta say, you can't get bored of looking at pieces from all walks of life, all different ages. I don't know if you're still there, Cam.
GMTs, yep. Yeah.
And Megan's saying big thank you. Thanks a lot, Megan. It's been a great show. Very much appreciated. Don't forget to like the show. Thanks so much, Megan. And again, I should mention all of Cam's links are in the description of this video if you'd like to have a look at his YouTube, which is far superior to mine when it comes to videography and the discussion itself and looking at history, and so it is. I mean, yeah, I'm making you blush, Cam. There we go.
You are. Oh, cool watch. Yeah, I love the Icopod.
Mark
Super
Newson,
cool.
It's pretty nice. I mean, talking about industrial design, Mark Newson went over to Apple to help Johnny Ive come up with the Apple Watch, and that's where that whole partnership was forged.
Yep.
But what's funny is, me being an industrial designer, I can't really appreciate this watch very much. Can I say that? Can I say that publicly?
No, you can totally say it. I like that. I like that you have an opinion on it, you know?
Yeah. I think an industrial designer putting his or her stamp on a watch is something bold. It's unique, but there are just so many watches that do it better. And It's the thing is with industrial designers generally, it's trying to get your fingers into every pie, basically. And a lot of the time, it can get a bit iffy if you're not someone who really understands what you're designing, really. But then at the same time, the presence of this watch is a good job. Icopod, I think he started in the 90s and all the rest.
Yeah, he did.
And yeah, oh geez, Thomas, thank you for the super chat. And everyone else who's watching, I hope you're just enjoying. We're basically just bantering now amongst ourselves on whatever subjects, which is fun. I mean, this is how you
True
capture.
tone.
That's how you
Yeah.
capture that dial. Thomas Burnett, this is watch porn for you, my friend. It's just stunning. I don't know how many more shots we have going, but I think we've had a look at this AP already. And as it is, I mean, a double red, you love your double red sea dwellers, right?
Yeah, I love a good double red sea dweller. I mean, it's just the history, the story behind it, the 2 red lines of text, you know, T29 Superdome crystal. It just, the whole thing, it sets it off. It's amazing.
It's a proof of concept watch, which I think is so special. And 73 Math, thank you for the super chat again. Never truly find your grail. I agree. I mean, that's the one underlying detail, is that we will never be satisfied in this space. I mean, look at this. I got a lot of flack because I didn't know this watch and its official name. Can you please tell me?
The Bunwasser?
Yeah.
3H Bunwasser? Yeah.
The Buntwasser, is that what they say?
Buntwasser. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have the right accent.
Yeah, sorry. I've got a bit of Dutch.
Super cool Hoyer, and you know, they're really cool. Again, another military watch. This was a really cool one. What's funny is, like, there's a lot of, like, debate and talk about watches being reloomed, and within the military watches, a lot of times you'll see them, they're reloomed, and they're reloomed by the military because they needed luminous material to be an effective use of.
Very good point.
You know, so sometimes we look for, that in watches like this because it shows that they've been serviced within the military and stuff like that. Obviously, you wouldn't want a reloomed, like a, Paul Newman or like a sub or something like that. But
oh man,
but
it's exceptional. It really is. Yeah, sorry, I cut you off there. Keep going.
No. I'm just saying, in some cases, it's you look for the flaws in things. You look for the maker's mark. You look for the, that kind of stuff. So.
Again, it feels like a minefield to me, hearing these stories about looking for reloom from it because of its military history and its background. You have to have a dictionary on this stuff, like yellow pages, just to help you, orientate yourself in this area. Again, another Daytona that looks in pretty good nick, but it's also funny. It's good to see that these watches have been worn. I think lining up with that question about laser welding and all the rest on top of it, this at least tells you that this watch is as good as it could be. It hasn't been retouched anywhere. It's pretty important.
Agreed. Yep.
Yeah, and just, I don't know how many more. Yeah, we still got more going. I mean, I love.
Eric commented. He said H3 is tritium, which is, it's exactly what the H3 designation on the.
Yeah, and Eric Bell is an ex Navy man. He's doved and dived everywhere in the world. He's quite an interesting chap, I must say. There's some amazing viewers. Your backgrounds, the people in the chat at the moment, they have some incredible backgrounds, and it's very special chatting amongst you. And the live chat is always. And IDGuy says that HD is deuterium. Jeez, that's another isotope. H202 is hydrogen peroxide. I'm having a chemistry lesson. I love it. Vintage Rolex field manual. Megan says, is there such a thing?
There is, yeah. There's one that just came out, I think not that long ago. It's called the Vintage Rolex Field Guide. I actually have it here on my desk.
Nice.
I was looking through it. It's actually worth a read. There's a lot of information, and a lot of it is very good. And that's the other hard part, is like looking at a lot of this stuff and really understanding it and having experience with the subject matter.
Here's a perfect example. There was mention on the question: is it real? Is it this and that? I mean, this is where it really gets convoluted, because there's just there is a consensus that certain areas make this legitimate, like the serifs in various places, right? There's a little dot underneath the bezel somewhere. But was this ever officially released by Rolex? That's one thing I would like to know, actually.
Yeah. So for me, and amongst the other, dealers and scholars, I guess, as you could say, within the vintage watch community, there is general consensus at the expert level that they are real. And I would actually agree with that. there are finishing details and font characteristics that would be literally impossible to create without like putting so much money into creating something that was a counterfeit. And so, you know, I think part of the reason why, you know, the blueberry has gotten a bad rap, and, you know, there's a you know, Orchi Pilar went on to say that they were fake and all this stuff, is I don't think every one is real. I've seen a lot of fake blueberries. Matter of fact, I've seen more fake blueberries than I have seen real ones, but the real ones, in my expert opinion, are real. And on top of that, I would say that, you know, they possess a finishing characteristic that is basically impossible to create outside of Rolex. To create that type of, you know, font and finishing detail would just be cost prohibitive. So going back to this, like, I think people in some cases fail to realize that, like, you know, some of these things are just so hard to create and would be impossible, given that, you know, if somebody was trying to dupe somebody, that there has to be some kind of underlying like profit or something like that there, that just, you know.
And I'm pretty sure, so I see Zane mentioning that if you speak to Eric Koo, would he know you? I'm pretty sure you've spoken to Eric Koo before. You guys are quite tight, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I know Eric Koo, Eric Wind.
These guys are all interconnected. Again, this is the California side, so you can imagine most of these guys. I mean, you were born in New York, so I'd imagine you know everyone around there too. So yeah, as it is, it's just exceptional. I mean, we could just keep rolling through with all of these pieces. I don't know. I mean, this is an example of Croton. I've never heard of this before. Sounds
very,
like
very cool watch.
Sounds like a you know, something you eat with soup. But
yeah, Chronomaster Aviator Sea Diver. There's a lot of really interesting, like, Crotons. And again, this is a watch that I really like, that is pretty accessible for what's happening under that horological hood, so to speak. So, you know, this could be a Grail for somebody for sure.
Yeah, just talk, and again, we as you know, we deviate away from the Grail watch. Oh, 5512. I think this is the first one we've had a look at. We've deviated from the Grail watch discussion, but I mean, most of these, we're talking about the field of vintage pieces, and these definitely do line up in that sphere.
Yeah, that's an early 5512 bicolor text. So the depth rating in Submariner is in gilt, and then the superlative chronometer officially certified is in silver, if you look at that. So that's a bicolor gilt dial, which is cool.
I think it's just exceptional. Looking at the bracelet quality, I've always thought that rivet bracelets just turn to absolute rubbish once, because I mean, the way these are made, they are so chintzy, right?
They are.
And how they can be so tight at this point in time. It must take quite a lot of skill to make sure that it all, you know, lines up. Yeah, it's just stunning. I mean, I need to keep running through. I don't know how many more we have on. This is pretty great because we could call this almost a neo vintage, right? At this point in time, GMT Coke with a tritium dial. I would imagine this is like 90s era, plus or minus.
That, I believe, is a fat lady. So, or is that a fat lady? Gosh,
let's have a look.
So many pictures.
I know. Sophia Loren, is that the nickname that they call it? I don't know. I'm also very bad with my references. And how do you even clarify that? I can't tell a difference. Is it the lug size?
It's the lugs. Yeah, the lugs look a little bit fatter in that to me, quote unquote. But the fat ladies are really an interesting piece.
I'm looking at a question from Foreman saying, ask Cam, is the Croton was the watch brand that sold its watches in water-filled tube in the 70s, much like plastic tube 3 tennis balls are sold in? I don't know. Do you know any history behind Croton? Did they actually advertise their watches in tube containers?
I don't know. I've never heard about that, actually.
And Rolex was using like fish bowls. I don't know what each brand was.
I think what he's talking about is like, were they advertising them as to be like water resistant and maybe sold? Yeah, Rolex would have like a sub or one of their oyster cases in like a fish bowl, and the watch would be like running in the fish bowl to show that it was you know, actually waterproof. Yeah.
Turkey vulture croutons. That was the word I was referring to, by the way, talking about something that sounded like it was supposed to be in soup. I love these radial dials where the numerals follow the track. It's something so
that's
special.
a cool piece.
This is definitely 40s era, I would imagine, right?
That's 40s, yes.
Love it. And as it is, I don't know if,
Gilt 5513, really
yeah,
pretty.
I don't know. I mean, we've just been rolling through these again and again. Here's a modern Panerai. How's that for a change? It was mentioned in the chat somewhere saying, Pam, are there any Pam lovers? And we found one, so that's something. Yeah, and Forbin saying someone did pack their watch in a water-filled tube. It could have been Blancpain, maybe. I don't know. I have heard a couple of brands definitely jumped on it. We've looked at these Doxers already. Another Omega from the 40s. Another Mark II.
Mark II, yeah.
I love this.
Really
Mark
cool
II.
Elgin. That was like a Swiss.
I'm going to get back to it now. Let's get back to
Elgin.
it. Hold on a sec. Yeah, this is so like, this is just so 70s, hey? It's almost awkward because it's so 70s in the way it was done. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, totally. And what's great about it is that, the Elgin company was an American watchmaking company, and the name was sold off in the 60s. So this is actually a Swiss-made Elgin, but the brand itself started in the United States. So it was a really interesting watch. I really liked this one a lot too. This one had all the boxes and the papers and stuff, and probably wasn't sold, or even really used because but I thought that
it just looks so awkward, and it's just fantastic. It's just so typical.
White dial, so it's like kind of a Panda dial, but it's cool seeing Swiss on an Elgin because it was an American company. That
nice story. I like that. And again, it's the just look at the way the photo's been taken with the orange of the hands and the cream of the patina on the yellow side of it.
Yeah.
I think it makes such a nice composition as far as photos go. And as it is, I mean, we've been speaking about Speedmasters already, but is this for you? If we're talking about Ultra Grail, would you sell everything off and get an original first Omega in space, say, an Ed White variant that is just untouched, new old stock? And would that be your collection?
I've had them, I actually prefer the pre-moon or the post-moon Speedmasters more than Ed White for me personally. Again, it's kind of like they're all my children, I like all of them differently, but if I had a preference between them, I would probably go with like a later Speedmaster.
It's just, and again, the photographs, we've had a look at this already, but geez, I really enjoy it. What I've also love about the macro photography is we get to see all the degradation on all these pieces in different ways. Call it degradation, call it age, call it wear, patina. Again, it's that mood and that atmosphere that you get with these watches that generally you don't in most situations. And again, this was the cover photo, darling, as the angelic Grail that many people would probably aspire to own. They did Zenith right back in the day, hey?
They did, and we were talking earlier about companies post-war like kind of doing their own thing. This is a perfect example of actually the opposite of that, where Rolex was leveraging a base Zenith caliber movement and then ultimately modifying it to meet their needs from an automatic chronograph perspective. It wasn't until later that Rolex ultimately leveraged their own in-house caliber of automatic or self-winding chronograph movement.
I find it a funny story. Hey? It's a weird area in the industry discussing how Rolex was all manual wind and then decided to go automatic. The way they've done their dial arrangements are so different to the Zeniths. They're not symmetrical. They're a little bit asymmetrical, and so it is. 73 Math asking me, do I have a Grail? I just want to get into the seat of a Rolex at the moment, something like an Explorer, and I'll be pretty happy with that. But no, I don't have anything specific. I could tell you that much. And then this is an original jumbo, right? That's
a 5402. Yep.
And I mean, also you get to see the age and wear. Talking again about sports watches, would this be a watch that you would want to climb a mountain with? Don't know so much.
I don't think so. I think maybe it's a hybrid watch, right? Like it's like a sports-ish watch. Maybe that's what we should start calling them.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, that's one area that I don't get. There's some days I wake up and say that these watches are just mind blow. They're so well done, but then again, I think does it fulfill the criteria of a sports watch? And yeah. And I'm 99% Grail confused, Michael said. Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And this, I mean, another 1016, this one tropicalized on the side. Geez, how long have we been going for? This is now coming up to 10 past 3 hours. So what should we do, ladies and gents? I think this should be the last watch of the show because we're going to be going on for hours and hours at this point. And I think we've had a pretty good time chatting.
Mackenzie asked, Cam, do you meet with clients after you sell them watches? Absolutely, yes. Again, we're definitely down to meet and have a watch conversation. But I think, I'm trying to buy watches and sell watches and look at things and also have a life too. So it's been a little, it can be
hectic,
tricky sometimes.
yeah. But I think we should call it a show after this. I mean, 1016 we can end on because we've gone pretty ballistic with these pieces today. I hope you have enjoyed the variety of stuff on offer. I mean, geez, if I had to open up the screen and just look at what else is coming up, it's never ending. Maybe if can I full screen this? I don't know. Again, Cam, sorry about the sound situation and everything else. We just know
dude, no, I'm sorry that we had a technical difficulty,
Technology always, geez, Smith W10, and so it goes. Technology always gives you the finger at the end of the day when you're trying your best to be as efficient as possible. Everything's working fine, and then a bit of an audio delay. But all in all, I mean, we've got a Calatrava. I love the strap on this piece. It's sublime. Looks fantastic. And Megan asked about the climbing. I thought that was funny. Yeah, I'd love to climb a mountain with an AP. That'd be great. But just in general, I mean, I've had a great time chatting to you, Cam. First time I've had a guest on the show before, and I hope you have enjoyed the vibe and the discussion. Generally, it's very open-ended. It's not so focused on a specific theme. This is phenomenal. I mean, is this original, this dial? It looks exceptional.
That actually is really cool. That's a Watchco. So that's a really interesting Seamaster. Have you heard about the Watchco story?
Never.
So Watchco was a company out of, I think it was like New Zealand, actually. There was an Omega authorized dealer in New Zealand, and Omega sent them a bunch of service parts. So service dial, service cases and all that stuff. And then, they stopped ultimately just producing that.
I have heard that story before.
It's really cool. We have like a lot of requests for these. So essentially, like, this would be like basically a vintage master, but built using genuine Omega parts that were intended for this use. So it's like basically receiving like a brand new Omega Seamaster 300 that is fully ISO rated and all that kind of stuff.
You're going robot voice again, Cam. Sorry.
Oh no.
I swear this has been on and off all day, but I mean, yeah, as it is, we've tried our best, and I think Megan's saying we should do a part 2. I think we should, and have a bit more of a centralized discussion about something simpler next time. Maybe this has been a bit of a large pill as far as shows go. I think with all the technicalities and details in between. Yeah, but I've just loved it. This is just, as most of us probably can tell, these photos are just absolutely exceptional. And yeah, man, I think we're actually getting, how's that? We're actually getting quite close to the end of these pieces. Would you believe? This is the watch.
Believe it.
This is the watch that I actually want to leave on the screen for a little while. And just, yeah, I want to thank, I thought everyone's saying thank you to me. I want to thank everyone else who's, been a part of the show, who's been in the comments. We've had a good laugh. And, it's been great having Cam on for a change. We've been discussing having a show together for a while. This is just exceptional. Would you say this is the watch you would go for now with the Lyre lugs and everything else?
Yeah, I love those. Yeah, I love the twisted lugs. It's incredible.
Oh, the condition. I mean, again, the photography itself, you get to see every little detail. The tritium has had its time, but all in all, I mean, what I find hilarious is these watches were used. They weren't bought to be kept in a safe. So after all this time, it's full life, and it still looks as it does. It's pretty exceptional. Owners do know how to take care of their pieces. Rob saying, don't worry, this was a successful show despite the challenges. We live on challenges, right?
Totally.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely want to wrap up the show. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to close this off and just get us chatting on the main screen, possibly, maybe, because we've been running for a long time. This has been quite a debate. I don't know if you're even on the screen at the moment. Hold on a sec, Cam. Are you?
Oh,
there.
Am I on the screen?
I think so.
There I am.
I think you are. Yeah, ladies and gents, it's been exceptional. It's been such a different approach. I've got a new microphone set up. It's been new audio. We've got Cam's audio that's been banging out. But all in all, I think we've had a pretty good time. It's been a nice discussion around whatever this has been. Grail Watches was the theme. And if anyone would like to ask another question, I think we have one more one more question. Oh, Megan just saying thank you, 73 Math. Thank you so much. All of you guys who have been a part of the show. Megan saying, IDGuy, Craft and Taylor, great show as always. And that's it. I mean, Cam, it's been a pleasure having you. It's been at the beginning was nice and streamlined. Then it went off the rails,
thanks, man.
and then it clarified as we got to the end, which is a laugh.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, this has been super fun, and I've enjoyed this, and this is exactly what I love doing. I like talking watches and sharing my passion and learning from others too. I mean, there's so much out there that I'm still learning. I know a lot, but I'm always still learning. So
yeah, that's been great.
Cool.
And everyone, and asking thoughts on Lunga. That's a great question. Cam, what are your thoughts on Lunga as a brand?
I think it's cool. Yeah. I mean, totally. And I think they're definitely, I mean, as a brand that I think is even moving more into like the more vintage spotlight, like a Longa One. I mean, they're incredible. I mean, just artful and, kind of pushing the boundaries of design. And
I love how they keep to their standards of, that inspired Saxonian approach that is so German in the way they do it. Pocket watch aesthetic. It's all just so true to what they believe in and stand for. The Odysseus, on the other hand, is a little bit peculiar, but all in all, interesting family of pieces, right? I'd love to own one. I think Lunga 1815 chronograph is what I'm going to end on. That'll probably be the grail for me at the end of the day when all is said and done. But as it is, I really want to thank you all for being a part of the show. Zane, you've been wonderful as always. It's great chatting. Call me Zane. No, for sure. I mean, Zane, I can give you Cam's number if you like. You guys can have a chat. But I mean, Zane, as is, Zane always likes to talk and shoot the whatever. It's been great. You've all been phenomenal, and it's been over 3 hours. It's been a pleasure. Cam, I want to say thank you. You can stay on for a little while after this. We can just wrap up there, but I'm going to end the broadcast with all of you who've been a part of the show, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Apologies for the technical difficulties, but you can never fully get it right. So to all of you out there, have a superb weekend. Look after yourselves, and
thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, man. We can do this again, and hopefully next time around it'll be a little bit more streamlined.
Yeah, we'll work out the kinks.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, everyone who's watching, we'll probably have another show next weekend. Don't know what it's going to be about, but until then, there's some great videos coming out next week as always. And yeah, lots of love to everyone joining, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers for now.
See you guys. Bye.